It's a pity that thinking is one thing. Actually doing it is quite another thing. Originally, according to Li Xuanling's idea, he would be the new army captain, and the 4 colonels below would also be all taken by outsiders, but the Li family members in the council weren't willing. In the month since the formation of the new army, the Li family members in the council showcased their prowess, directly securing all 4 colonel positions. Currently among the 4 colonels, not to mention Li Yuankai and Li Yuanqing, who are directly from the Li family, Cheng He and Song Ning, although sons of Cheng Guang and Song Kang, are also grandsons of Li Tiancheng, making them the Li family's relatives by marriage. Of course, Zhou Yuan as the capital commandant is still the highest commander of the new army. The problem is, with 4 direct subordinates leading troops, all being from the Li family, how much authority does he have left as the capital commandant? From the 4 just questioning him, one can see some clues. Not to mention, among the 4, the only one who truly meets his standards is Cheng He. Li Yuankai, Li Yuanqing, and Song Ning have only broken through the cold resistance level for a few months at most. Their strength is average, their experience outside is lacking, and worse, they have arrogant personalities with poor reputations in the camp. Take it slow, the leader made me this capital commandant, also under the pressure of those Li family people. No matter what, I can't let her trust down. Zhou Yuan sighed softly, moved to the army's flank and continued urging. They 3 kilometers east of the convoy. Seeing Cheng He gazing far into the surroundings, really searching around, Li Yuanqing shook his head and said, Cheng He, you're really scouting. In front, Cheng He paused slightly, turned his head with a look of confusion. Seeing his expression, Li Yuanqing sneered, Who has already switched to our Long Mountain? Who in the whole of Longyu would dare have ideas against us now? Surely it won't be that camp called Great Xia. He continued without waiting for Cheng He's response. Zhou Yuan, the new army captain, was appointed by the leader against all opposition. He's afraid of messing up and being removed by the council. His excessive tension is understandable. Hearing this, Cheng He bowed his head in silence for a moment, then looked at Li Yuanqing and said, Caution is not mistaken, especially for a newly established army. Li Yuanqing sneered, showing disdain. No matter how careful, this new army captain Zhou Yuan can't last long either. As an outsider trying to grasp military power, it's a dream. Hearing this last sentence, Cheng He's pupils narrowed slightly, but he kept his composure and replied calmly, But he was appointed by the leader personally. I understand the abilities of Uncle Zhou. He has the strength, capability, and troop-leading skills. As long as the leader supports him, it won't be easy for the council to remove him from the capital commandant position either. His father, Cheng Guang, was one of the Longshan 8 Great Vajra along with Zhou Yuan, so by seniority, he indeed had to call Zhou Yuan uncle. Cheng He had a certain understanding of this Uncle Zhou Yuan. Longshan 8 Great Vajra were the direct subordinates trained by Li Tianhu in the early years. Zhou Yuan, with late-stage cold resistance strength, ranks first among the 8 Great Vajra. Not to mention, when Li Tianhu created the first Longyu army, the first commanding officer was Zhou Yuan. There's not much doubt about Zhou Yuan's ability and strength in the camp. In fact, if it weren't for his outsider identity, he was clearly more qualified than the 3 Li Xuanxiang brothers to lead the Longyu army. Li Yuanqing obviously understood this too. Hearing Cheng He's words, he paused momentarily but quickly resumed, sneering. This has nothing to do with strength or capability. Zhou Yuan has failed to position himself properly. If he really stabilizes this capital commandant position, outsiders in the camp might all want a piece of military power once there's a precedent. Then what? He paused slightly and smiled at Cheng He. Cheng He, you wouldn't consider yourself an outsider, would you? Cheng He's face paused and then shook his head. Of course not. Cheng He's mother was Li Tiancheng's second daughter, Li Xunyu, making him a relative of the Li family by marriage, so he wasn't really considered an outsider. That's good. Li Yuanqing nodded and continued walking forward. Cheng He watched Li Yuanqing's back for a while. A hint of disgust flashed in his eyes but was quickly concealed. Then he called out. Enough, we're almost 4 kilometers from the army. Let's go back and report. Li Yuanqing clearly had no intention of returning, waved his hand and said, It's hard to get away from the army and catch a breath. I don't want to go back so early. Up ahead is Changbai Gully. Zhou Yuan wanted us to scout. Might as well take a look. Cheng He stood in place for a moment, looked back to see the army no longer in sight. A hint of hesitation crossed his face, but seeing Li Yuanqing already walking east, he still followed along. Most of Longyu is plains, but it's not all smooth paths. For example, Changbai Gully is a typical example. Changbai Gully is a deep gully east of Changning, extending north to south, with a total length of about a dozen kilometers, over 20 meters wide and more than 100 meters deep. The characteristic of Changning Camp's territory is its long and narrow north-south stretch. This Changbai Gully almost runs through half of Changning's entire territory. To go east from Changning into White Abyss territory, one must either take the wooden bridge over the gully or detour north or south. Changning used to be really poor, a gully over 20 meters wide, and they only built such a narrow wooden bridge. It's no wonder they say it takes 5 hours. The army detours south, adding 5 or 6 kilometers to the journey for nothing. Chapter 690, Chapter 286, Zhou Yuan's Dilemma, Changbai Gully. Li Yuanqing had already walked to the west side of Changbai Gully, looking down at the deep trench below. Changning now belonged to Long Mountain. They were already aware of the general situation of Changbai Gully before setting off and knew their route. Changning's financial resources are indeed lacking, but not building an iron bridge shouldn't be the reason. Their previous relationship with Baiyuan Camp was bad, and this Changbai Gully is like a natural trench between them. Hey, look below, why is there a light? Suddenly interrupted by Li Yuanqing, Cheng He looked puzzled. He then stepped forward to look in the direction Li Yuanqing was pointing, towards the bottom of the trench. As soon as he looked, he was stunned. Normally, Changbai Gully was a place where no one would come. Besides the accumulated snow, there should be nothing at the bottom of the trench. But at this moment where he was staring, there was clearly a large patch of light. It seemed like moonlight was reflecting off something. Li Yuanqing probably thought it was a treasure, and his expression was a bit excited. Cheng He's brows furrowed deeply. He looked up at the moon, then looked down at the trench, trying to see more clearly. But just as he looked down, his peripheral vision caught his shoulder. As commanding officer of the 2nd Regiment of the New Army, he was naturally armored. The iron armor on his shoulder was also catching the moonlight, emitting a glow exactly like the large patch of light at the bottom of the trench. Run! Cheng He's expression changed drastically. His brow twitched as he turned to yell at Li Yuanqing. Li Yuanqing turned around, his face full of confusion. But soon he understood. Whoosh! A fierce blade sound suddenly flew out from beneath the trench wall. Swish and swish and swish. Then 5 or 6 speeding iron arrows suddenly shot towards the two of them from the opposite side of the trench. The mere sound of the arrows cutting through the air was enough to sting the ears, showing their immense power. A black saber angled towards him, and Cheng He hastily raised his saber to block. Bang! The 1,000-fold refined saber in his hand was chipped, and his body flew backward like a broken kite for over 20 meters. It's an ambush, need to go back and report. As the thought flashed through Cheng He's mind, it was already too late. Spurt! He suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and couldn't stand up from the snow. Looking up, he saw Li Yuanqing pinned to the ground by 3 iron arrows, not even having the chance to scream, being pressed down by several people in pale gold iron armor. It's over. A chop struck his face, and the severely injured Cheng He was unable to resist, his vision going black as a strong dizziness overwhelmed him. These two don't even have the strength of 2 main hairs. Seems they just broke through to the cold resistance level. The 2 who just went south have similar strength. The Long Mountain leader isn't stupid, they must be here to scout. We've seen it before, 10 large carts can't cross the wooden bridge. They must be planning to detour south at Changbai Gully. Liu Yuan, take the army south along the trench bottom to find a suitable place to ambush. I'll go keep an eye on them first. Yes, Commander, what about these 2? Should we kill them? No need to kill, just tie them up and bring them along. In a daze, Cheng He ultimately fainted before he could hear all the words. Capital Commandant, everything is normal on the south side of Changbai Gully, detouring is possible. At the front of the Longyu army, Song Ning and Li Yuankai returned and immediately reported the situation to Zhou Yuan. Upon hearing their report, Zhou Yuan nodded. There was less than a kilometer to Changbai Gully. Once the army arrived, they only needed to detour 5 kilometers to cross Changbai Gully, leaving just 10 kilometers to the eastern border of Changning. After instructing the army to continue advancing, Zhou Yuan turned to ask Song Ning and Li Yuankai. Where are Li Yuanqing and Cheng He? Li Yuankai and Song Ning were taken aback and shook their heads. Hearing this, Zhou Yuan's brows furrowed, showing a hint of anger. I sent them to scout, and it's been so long without them coming back. Are they truly ignoring the orders of this capital commandant? Go find them and make them return at once. This, as you command. Song Ning and Li Yuankai clearly did not understand why Zhou Yuan was angry. After a moment's hesitation, they saw Zhou Yuan's anger intensify and immediately bowed, agreeing to quickly head east to look for Li Yuanqing and Cheng He. Chapter 691. Chapter 287. Cloud Dragon Army's first battle, Zhou Yuan's bloody struggle, decisive victory and unexpected windfall. Once we start circling around, find a chance to leave the group. The army of Long Mountain had already stopped, and after a rest, they were preparing to head south. Behind the 9th large cart, Li Hu quickly whispered to Yang Zhang beside him. Yang Zhang glanced at the deep ravine less than half a mile ahead. Knowing this was the only opportunity, he immediately nodded in agreement. Throughout the journey, the two were always looking for a chance to leave the convoy, but Zhou Yuan kept urging them, watching too closely, making it impossible to find an opportunity. The team was finally resting, and beside them was a deep ravine. It was indeed a good opportunity. All right, let's move out. With an order from Zhou Yuan, the army, having rested for about 10 minutes, started to turn and circle south along the Changbai Gully with 10 large carts in tow. The convoy moved south for half an hour and traveled less than a kilometer when they could already see the end of Changbai Gully from a distance. Why haven't those two returned yet? Zhou Yuan, on the flank of the convoy, turned to look behind, his expression angry. Song Ning and Li Yuankai had been gone for over 40 minutes. Does it really take that long to find someone? Zhou Yuan frowned, suppressing his anger, then turned to look at the vast snowfield ahead of the army. His expression eased considerably. Most of Longyu is flat and the visibility is wide open, especially in Changning, where aside from this ravine, you can't even find a snow hill to hide. Besides, Hu had already joined forces with Long Mountain. Right now, among the forces in Longyu that could threaten the Longyu army, there were basically none left. Long Mountain had long sent scouts to probe Great Xia's situation. Although Great Xia's strength was decent, left in Longyu were just 2,000 ordinary earth-digging realm individuals. If these few dare to ambush, Zhou Yuan would actually be pleased. Surely they wouldn't hide the army in the ravine. Zhou Yuan turned to look at Changbai Gully not far to the east, his brow slightly furrowed, hesitant for a moment before walking over. Better safe than sorry. At this moment, the army was marching south along the ravine, about 200 to 300 meters away from the west side of Changbai Gully. Zhou Yuan soon approached within 100 meters. The cold resistance level has sensing abilities. As he was just over 100 meters from the ravine, Zhou Yuan slowed his steps, holding his breath to sense the situation over there. But right at that moment, a loud shout came from the rear of the army. Capital Commandant, there's an issue. We searched all along Changbai Gully and couldn't find Cheng He and Li Yuanqing. Just now, we found signs of a scuffle beside the ravine. It was Song Ning's voice. Upon hearing, Zhou Yuan's brows furrowed deeply. He immediately turned his gaze and noticed the army moving a little more ahead, getting closer to the nearest point to Changbai Gully, only 100 meters away. He instantly realized something. His face suddenly changed with alarm, shouting loudly, "Stop! Everyone stop! Quickly stop! Fire arrows!" Whiz! An iron arrow suddenly shot from the direction of Changbai Gully towards the convoy. Whiz, whiz, whiz! Immediately afterward, dozens, over 100 iron arrows, simultaneously shot towards the direction of Long Mountain Army's convoy. The sound of iron arrows breaking through the air was almost simultaneous with Zhou Yuan's urgent call. Hence those in Long Mountain Army's convoy had no time to react. Thunk thunk. These iron arrows, whether in accuracy or power, far exceeded Long Mountain Army's expectations. The actual number of arrows in the first volley wasn't large, barely 200 to 300 arrows. Yet all 200 to 300 arrows, without exception, hit the targets. Even most of the iron arrows accurately pierced through the soldiers' faces, arms, or waists, disabling these crucial parts which had no iron armor protection. The convoy, formed by 10 large carts, had a length of at least 200 meters. Over 1,000 soldiers were already widely dispersed. Hit by this arrow rain, their formation scattered even further. Ambush, ambush, quickly hide behind the carts, quick, quick, quick. On the Changbai Gully side, ready your bows and counterattack quick. Of course, Long Mountain soldiers weren't that foolish either. Quickly, the squad leaders reacted, starting to organize the army to use the four-wheeled carts as barriers to dodge iron arrows, then indicating the enemy's position, signaling everyone to take out bows to retaliate. Though they were newly formed soldiers, their equipment standards were as per the Longyu Army's regulations, including 30-stone-strong bows, 100 forged weapons, and war armor. All were equipped. Whiz, whiz, whiz. Unfortunately, they seemed to have little chance to counterattack. Arrows shot continuously from the direction of Changbai Gully, and as time passed, the number increased. Even some extremely powerful arrows appeared, capable of piercing their iron armor. "Stop, you damn bastards!" Zhou Yuan reacted extremely fast. The moment the fire arrows command sounded, he was already braving the arrow rain, shouting angrily as he charged towards Changbai Gully. He saw clearly, the moment the command was issued, over 100 soldiers clad in light gold armor suddenly emerged from the west side of Changbai Gully, wildly shooting towards Long Mountain convoy. The opponents indeed hid the army at the bottom of the ravine. At this moment, Zhou Yuan's heart was full of regret for not scouting the situation beneath Changbai Gully in advance, but there was no time to regret now. He could only continue pushing forward against the arrow rain, attempting to reach those soldiers currently shooting to disrupt their arrow formation. 30-stone-strong bows shooting a small-scale arrow rain wouldn't be enough to cause the 1,000-strong army to collapse. The convoy would quickly form its positioning. The key now was to scatter the 100-plus opponents, and then prevent enemy soldiers from continuously climbing up from the ravine. Chapter 692, Chapter 287, Cloud Dragon Army's First Battle, Zhou Yuan's Bloody Struggle, Decisive Victory and Unexpected Windfall, Part 2. When Zhou Yuan was only 50 meters away from the deep gully, he could already see clearly a large number of fully armed soldiers continuously climbing up from the bottom of the gully using ropes, then joining the ranks of archers. The arrow rain became even more fierce, and the soldiers from Long Mountain hiding behind the 10 carriages were so suppressed they didn't dare to lift their heads. Song Ning Li Yunkai organized the army for a counterattack. Don't worry about me. This scene undoubtedly made Zhou Yuan even angrier. After giving the order to Song Ning and Li Yunkai behind him, he immediately charged forward 30 meters with his broadsword. In the last 20 meters, Zhou Yuan didn't continue to charge but leapt into the air, raising his broadsword high and slashing down toward the enemy's arrow formation. However, strangely, not a single soldier who was shooting arrows looked up at him. They all kept staring intently in the direction of the convoy, mechanically repeating the shooting action, continuing to suppress the Long Mountain army. Someone. Zhou Yuan was no novice. With experience in hunting and leading troops, he immediately judged that someone was guarding the arrow formation when he saw the soldiers' reaction. But the problem was, when his broadsword was only 7 or 8 meters away from the frontline soldiers, still no one came out to stop him. Playing tricks. Zhou Yuan gritted his teeth. His strength of 11 zong suddenly erupted, and the broadsword continued to slash down toward the frontline soldiers. Swoosh! It's coming! Zhou Yuan's brow twitched sharply. The snow in front of the soldiers suddenly exploded, and a huge snow mist, more than 10 meters high, burst forth. Subsequently, a golden giant more than 3 meters tall stood up fiercely from it. Clang! The sword puppet's four-edged arm collided with Zhou Yuan's broadsword, creating a loud boom that shook it back 3 to 5 meters. Captain Zhou, long time no see. Behind the sword puppet, Xia Hong, wearing light gold armor, walked out slowly. After retracting the sword puppet's arm, he looked at Zhou Yuan with a slight smile. Zhou Yuan withdrew his shocked gaze from the sword puppet, looked at Xia Hong, and asked in a low voice, "Minister Xia, attacking Long Mountain for no reason, have you great Xia considered the consequences?" Reconnaissance camp and Mo Blade camp continue suppressing with arrows. Horizontal blade camp split into 2 lines and bypass the north and south, encircle the Long Mountain army. Xia Hong gave a clean and sharp command, answering Zhou Yuan's question. Almost all the soldiers of the Cloud Dragon army below Changbai Gully had climbed up the ropes. The Long Mountain convoy was located on the west side of Changbai Gully, so the starting position of the army coming up from the bottom of the gully was directly to their east. After Xia Hong issued his command, Liu Yuan led the reconnaissance camp and 3 Mo-blade camps, a total of 400 people, to continue suppressing the Long Mountain army with strong bows from the front. The 6 horizontal blade camps divided into 2 lines, shooting arrows while circling north and south, trying to encircle the Long Mountain convoy. The Long Mountain army was not foolish either. When the horizontal blade camps circumvented north and south, they quickly set up bows and arrows to counterattack, attempting to prevent them from reaching the sides. However, their counterattack was not only slow, but also chaotic and inaccurate due to the continuous suppression from Liu Yuan's 400 men at the front. Clang, clang. Xia Chuan did not idle. After ordering Liu Yuan, he controlled the sword puppet to continue entangling with Zhou Yuan. The sword puppet's limbs fiercely collided with Zhou Yuan's broadsword, and just the shockwave alone collapsed all the accumulated snow on the west side of Changbai Gully into the deep gully. From the initial battle, it was clear that his basic strength was inferior to Zhou Yuan's, so at most he could only entangle, and even that was challenging. Bang! With a diagonal slash, Zhou Yuan forced the sword puppet back more than 3 meters. He seized the momentum without giving respite, caught sight of Xia Chuan behind the sword puppet, and leapt bodily, aiming his broadsword straight at Xia Chuan. He clearly understood the principle of capturing the ringleader first. Instead of dealing with the troublesome sword puppet, it was better to directly target Xia Chuan, who controlled it. Unfortunately, his plan quickly fell through. The ghost head great saber and a spear flew from Xia Chuan's left and right sides from behind, not only utilizing Zhou Yuan's broadsword, but also cooperating with the sword puppet to send Zhou Yuan flying more than 20 meters away. Peng Bo Chen Yingyuan. Zhou Yuan immediately recognized the owners of the 2 weapons. Taking advantage of the momentum of being struck away, he ran straight toward the convoy without looking back. Evidently, when Chen Peng appeared, Zhou Yuan realized that he not only couldn't deal with Xia Chuan, but he would also be in danger if entangled with the 3 of them. So he chose to retreat, joining the Long Mountain army and facing the enemy. Smart but a bit late. Xia Chuan immediately saw through Zhou Yuan's intention. After a cold sneer, he controlled the sword puppet along with Chen Peng to give chase. At the same time, he loudly ordered all the Cloud Dragon army soldiers. Narrow the encirclement, discharge your iron arrows, and deploy the Mo-blade camp first. Long Mountain soldiers had all retreated behind the 4-wheeled carriages by now. As more and more iron arrows from the 6 horizontal blade camps shot from the north and south, the soldiers at both ends of the convoy began to converge toward the center. Soon, all the soldiers gathered on the west side of the 3 central 4-wheeled carriages. All the wooden boxes on the 3 carriages had long been pierced by those iron arrows. Weapons and armor were scattered everywhere. Fortunately, the carriages were made of iron and could withstand the iron arrow barrage. Song Ning and Li Yuankai were not foolish either, having long commanded the remaining soldiers to overturn the 3 iron carriages, using the cargo side as shields to form 3 iron walls, blocking the enemy's iron arrows. This method proved effective, and casualties immediately halted. Chapter 693, Chapter 287, Cloud Dragon Army's First Battle, Zhou Yuan's Bloody Struggle, Decisive Victory and Unexpected Windfall Part 3. The problem is, they still can't make any counterattacks. Moreover, due to the excessive concentration of numbers, while Zhou Yuan and Xia Chuan were fighting, the 6 horizontal blade camps had already completed the encirclement of this area with the cooperation of 400 soldiers at the front. Damn it, we can't fight back at all. They're tightening the encirclement. We can only wait for them to run out of arrows. We can't even raise our heads. Hide well, there's a chance at close combat. We haven't even engaged and we've already lost a 5th. What chance is there? The Long Mountain soldiers were extremely aggrieved at this moment. The vast majority of them hadn't even seen what the enemy looked like before being suppressed behind the carts, not daring to show their heads. Many had poised their strong bows ready to retaliate, but as soon as they stood up, several iron arrows would immediately fly their way, leaving them no chance to aim. At most, only those with exceptional archery skills could quickly blind shoot a few arrows. Since it was blind shooting, accuracy was naturally out of the question. Inflicting injury on the enemy was even more impossible. 700 to 800 people were thus huddled in a circle formed by 3 carts. They all knew they could only wait for the enemy to empty their arrow quivers, planning close combat before there would be a chance to retaliate. The problem was, how many of them would still be left by then? Song Ning, take your men and break out from the west side. Xia Chuan and the others ultimately couldn't catch up with Zhou Yuan. He retreated to the middle of the Long Mountain army and immediately issued the order. Song Ning knew the situation was urgent, so he said nothing and joined Li Yuankai in leading a small team to open the gap on the west side. As soon as the gap was opened, the sound of iron arrows whistling through the air just happened to stop. Song Ning, Li Yuankai, and some Long Mountain soldiers immediately realized why Zhou Yuan had them open the west side gap and break out. The rain of arrows stopped. The iron arrows of the great Xia soldiers had all been shot. There was a chance now. Scout Camp Mo Blade Camp, charge with me. Just as hope lit up on the faces of Song Ning and the Long Mountain soldiers, a chilling voice sounded from the very front of the west side. Whoosh! A 7 or 8 meter long iron rod suddenly descended from the sky, aiming directly at Song Ning, who had just rushed out of the west side gap. The fierce wind whistling past his ear made Song Ning immediately realize that the power of this iron rod exceeded his imagination, so he quickly retreated to avoid it. Thud! After the iron rod landed, it directly shook the snow-covered ground within a radius of 3 to 4 meters and pierced over 2 meters deep into the ground, standing upright. Atop the iron rod waved a black banner, 2 meters wide and 4 meters long, with a big golden Xia character on the front and embroidered golden cloud Jiao on the back. The banner flapped wildly in the battlefield wind, and the cloud Jiao seemed to soar through clouds and mist with majestic momentum. Beside the banner stood a young man in black armor with a broad sword in hand, his expression indifferent. What does it mean to plant a banner here? The Long Mountain soldiers were a bit dazed, but quickly understood. Kill. Liu Yuan led 400 soldiers from the scout camp and Mo Blade camp over. They charged from the west gap. Though initially somewhat scattered, they now all fiercely and precisely aimed for the gap here. This banner marks the attack direction for the army. Zhou Yuan immediately saw the purpose of the banner, but he had no time to be amazed, angrily shouting to those behind him, "What are you all dazing for, preparing to die? Take up your weapons and break out to the west." The distance was too close to even draw their bows. As Zhou Yuan gave the command, Liu Yuan's 100 elite reconnaissance soldiers had already surpassed the banner, clashing with the foremost Long Mountain soldiers. Liu Yuan, at a cold resistance level, smashed into a crowd of earth-digging realm limit soldiers like a god of death, decapitating 5 or 6 people in just a dozen breaths, leading 100 elites to slash and charge several dozen meters inward. Meanwhile, 300 Mo Blade camp soldiers also began to engage with the Long Mountain army. Wielding giant Mo blades nearly 3 meters long, they charged forward with unstoppable momentum, no flashy movements, just relentless advancement. The Long Mountain army only had sabers a little over a meter long, utterly useless here, unable to even approach the Mo Blade camp soldiers, getting directly pierced and reduced to anguished cries. The rout happened in an instant. While the front row of Long Mountain soldiers retreated, the middle and back rows began to waver, clutching weapons, but having no idea what to do. The space encircled by 3 carts was only so big, with the Mo Blade camp's 300 soldiers blocking the gap, and the people inside unable to execute any maneuvers. Zhou Yuan knew it would be over if he didn't make a desperate effort, so he directly charged towards the foremost Mo Blade camp, trying to disrupt their attack rhythm. It had to be said, there was some effect. The progress of the Mo Blade camp, indeed, paused momentarily due to his presence. But it was only a moment. Xia Chuan controlled the sword puppet, directly blocking the front of the Mo Blade camp, entangling Zhou Yuan, and the subsequent joining of Chen Peng and another only worsened his situation. Push aside the carts, break out from another direction. It wasn't until he heard Song Ning's words. Zhou Yuan's expression changed dramatically. Blocking Chen Yingyuan's spear with his saber, he found a gap to turn back and angrily shouted, "Don't push aside the carts, fight inside them." His warning was too late. Song Ning presumably thought that, since the great Xia's iron arrows were spent, there was naturally no need to continue breaking out to the west, so pushing aside the other 2 carts and dispersing to break out would be the chance. Chapter 694, Chapter 287, Cloud Dragon Army's First Battle, Zhou Yuan's Bloody Struggle, Decisive Victory and Unexpected Windfall Part 4. The two large carts were finally pushed aside by the combined effort of the soldiers in the rear. But the moment they were pushed aside, a series of slender blades came slicing through. Horizontal blade camp brothers, charge with me. Brothers, charge. Follow me to attack. There were 6 horizontal blade camps, totaling 600 troops. They had been waiting at the back of the 2 carts for quite some time. The moment the Long Mountain soldiers pushed aside the 2 carts, 600 horizontal blade camp soldiers rushed from all directions, almost instantly breaking through the entire formation of the Long Mountain army. The most aggressive soldiers of the horizontal blade camp even met and merged with the Mo blade camp soldiers on the west side. Splash, clang, kill. If the Mo blade camp's assault only caused the Long Mountain army to crumble, then at this moment the Long Mountain army was completely stunned, especially when they discovered that their weapons couldn't penetrate the pale golden armor of the great Xia soldiers, but the enemy's weapons could cut through theirs. They were completely demoralized. Basic strength wasn't in their favor, armor wasn't either, and their weaponry was at a disadvantage. How could they possibly continue this battle? Escape. The majority of the remaining several hundred Longyu soldiers had the same thought flash in their minds, and as soon as this thought emerged, the balance of the battle tipped even more in favor of Great Xia. Splash. Liu Yuan had already broken through the Longyu formation, encountering the horizontal blade camp. Seeing the Longyu soldiers begin to scatter and flee, he immediately shouted to sway their hearts. Drop your weapons, surrender, and you'll not be killed. With his shout, the commanders of the 1st to 9th camps all began to shout as well. Drop your weapons, surrender, and you'll not be killed. Drop your weapons, surrender, and you'll not be killed. The Longyu soldiers were already terrified. Hearing the great Xia's words, expressions of struggle appeared on their faces. We've dominated Longyu for over 40 years, and it's always been other camps surrendering to us. To want us to surrender, you're dreaming. Zhou Yuan's furious roar awakened the Long Mountain soldiers, who initially wanted to surrender. They gritted their teeth, regrasped their weapons, and began a desperate fight. If others could do this, Zhou Yuan certainly could as well. He changed tactics, constantly trying to shake off Xia Chuan and his 2 companions, continuously moving toward the direction of the regular Great Xia soldiers. You have some bravery, but you've picked the wrong opponent. Xia Chuan immediately saw through Zhou Yuan's intention, knowing he aimed to disrupt the Cloud Jiao army's formation to create an escape opportunity for the remaining Long Mountain soldiers. Yuan Dao, Chen Yingba, Wu Tianxing Lin Kai, don't hold back. 3 figures dashed out from behind the Mo blade camp, joining the already charging Yuan Dao, making 4 cold resistance levels who plunged into the Long Mountain army, collaborating with the great Xia soldiers to start a merciless slaughter. It's over, the new army is finished. Seeing the great Xia sending in 4 more powerful cold resistance levels onto the battlefield, Zhou Yuan's face was filled with despair. This new army had been entrusted to him by Li Xuanling amidst much opposition. In just over a month, it was destroyed here. Zhou Yuan has failed the leader. Looking at the bodies of Longyu soldiers on the ground, Zhou Yuan fended off the sword puppet while roaring in anger as regret and fury peaked within him. After several crazed roars, he seemed to make a decision, and facing a strike from the sword puppet, he chose not to dodge but held his sword behind to block, ignoring the attacks from Chen Peng on the sides, and dashed towards the last small group of Long Mountain soldiers on the battlefield. This small group of soldiers numbered about 200 and managed to stick together, probably due to being led by Song Ning and Li Yunkai, and had not been dispersed and annihilated like the others. Boom! The back where Zhou Yuan held his sword to block was struck directly by the sword puppet, sending him flying forward due to the terrifying force. Simultaneously, Chen Peng's great blade and spear reached their marks from both sides. His strength was indeed impressive, but Xia Chuan, Chen Yingyuan, and Peng Bo also had basic strengths between 8 and 9, not too far apart from his. Crunch! Splash! He only managed to block Xia Chuan's sword puppet attack, while Peng Bo's great blade and Chen Yingyuan's spear pierced through the skin of his waist from both sides, stabbing directly into his flesh. Zhou Yuan's face turned pale, and he vomited a mouthful of blood, but his body didn't stop. Using the momentum from the 3 attacks, he continued to rush towards the small group of Long Mountain soldiers. Swoosh! Not only that, he lifted his blade, slashing towards Chen Yingba and Yuan Dao on the west side, even kicking away over a dozen soldiers of the Mo Blade camp. Zhou Yuan seemed to disregard his own life, using his body to withstand the Mo blades and chopping wildly to carve a path for Li Yunkai and Song Ning to escape. Scatter and flee. Great Xia can't catch you all, go back and report. Li Yunkai didn't hesitate and ran straight along the path. Song Ning gritted his teeth, chopped away at the surrounding Great Xia soldiers, and ran as well. Dozens of other lucky Longyu soldiers also managed to escape under Zhou Yuan's cover. The rest weren't so fortunate. Yuan Dao and Chen Yingba closed in again. Chen Yingyuan and Peng Bo also arrived in time. Despite Zhou Yuan's desperate struggle, he still couldn't escape defeat without even a chance to flee. Crack! When Xia Chuan arrived, Zhou Yuan had just been knocked away by Chen Yingyuan's spear, and Xia Chuan followed up with a downward strike of the sword puppet's right leg, slashing directly onto Zhou Yuan's back. The blood splattered, and Zhou Yuan's body was propelled by the terrifying force, crashing into the ground. With that, this ambush came to a complete end. Xia Chuan, despite achieving a great victory, displayed no sense of pride, only glanced meaningfully in the direction where the Long Mountain soldiers fled, then quickly turned to the Great Xia soldiers, giving orders. Don't account for casualties yet, collect the battlefield. Each set of these weapons and armor must be taken to the transport team, ensure it's done at the fastest speed. The Cloud Jiao army soldiers, still immersed in joy, were clearly taken aback. Are you all deaf? The commander ordered it move quickly. Liu Yuan urged again, and the group finally snapped back to reality, immediately acting according to Xia Chuan's orders. The armor and weapons worn by the Long Mountain soldiers, just like the 800 sets of weapons and armor loaded on the 10 large carts, were all of the 100 forged level, which they naturally wouldn't let slip by. The 10 iron four-wheeled carts were also considered extremely valuable. Of course, there were also the prisoners. There aren't many living prisoners, only a bit more than 200, but there's also. Liu Yuan quickly reported to Xia Chuan. While the casualties of the Cloud Jiao army hadn't been counted yet, the number of prisoners from Long Mountain needed to be tallied. Wu Tangxing and Lin Kai dragged Cheng He and Li Yuanqing over, both with significant injuries and evident fear in their expressions. Yuan Dao held Zhou Yuan, who was severely injured and weak, yet still looked defiantly at Xia Chuan, his eyes filled with anger, clearly holding a strong grudge against him. Xia Chuan looked at the three of them, speaking mildly. We didn't lose many new army troops. There are only a little over 200 prisoners, and then there's this. Liu Yuan quickly approached Xia Chuan to report. The casualties of the Cloud Jiao army weren't counted, but evidently, there weren't many left. Yuan Dao and Chen Yingba encircled again, and Chen Yingyuan and Peng Bo arrived just in time. Under their siege, despite Zhou Yuan's desperate struggle, he still couldn't escape defeat. He didn't even have a chance to escape. Xia Chuan watched the three men, saying, "Capture them alive and take them down. There's nothing left of this new army. 3 cold resistance levels have been captured alive. It should cause Long Mountain pain for a long time." Upon hearing Xia Chuan's final sarcastic remark, Yuan Dao and others chuckled softly. Everyone, don't just stand there. It's not often we can strike it rich. Aren't there 3 camps of brothers without 100 forged armor? Let them use these for now. With Xia Chuan's command, all the cold resistance levels helped. The battlefield was quickly cleared, and the Cloud Jiao army, laden with spoils, began to head south, with 10 empty large carts in tow. Xia Chuan stood nearby with a few cold resistance levels, waiting until the last cart began to move before turning his head to look quickly southward, following the main army. It's impossible for them to chase us down. The 800 sets of armor and weapons were originally meant to be sent to White Abyss. Next, let's see how Hu will respond. With a glint of frost in his eyes, Xia Chuan, Yuan Dao and Chen Yingba accompanied the troops, moving rapidly southwards. Chapter 695, Chapter 288, On the March, Hu's Wrath. A bit faster, it's been half an hour and we've only covered a kilometer. Too slow. The people pushing and pulling the carts, pack all the supplies onto the carts and pick up the pace. On the southern border of Chaining, the Cloud Dragon army was escorting 10 empty carts and more than 200 prisoners, forming a long convoy moving south. Despite Liu Yuan constantly urging alongside the 9 camp captains, the overall marching speed remained shockingly slow. Xia Chuan and Yuan Dao, along with 6 cold resistance level leaders, guarded Zhou Yuan and 3 other cold resistance levels at the tail end of the convoy. Watching the snail-like marching speed of the convoy, not only Xia Chuan, but also the individuals next to him, including Yuan Dao, had furrowed brows. This marching speed was truly too slow. About 1 kilometer in half an hour, even without comparing to the Great Xia's straight road. It's astonishingly slow compared to normal marching in the Wushuang realm. Though the carts are empty, people are carrying too much supply. Everyone has 2 sets of armor and weapons on their back, weighing at least tens of thousands of pounds collectively. Wanting to go faster is impossible. During the recent combat, all the wooden boxes on the carts were destroyed, and only a portion of the weapons and armor can be loaded onto the carts, which doesn't help speed up much and wastes time instead. We can only keep trudging on. No other options. We're inherently unfamiliar with the road conditions within Changning and Songyuan realm, and this route was temporarily surveyed and planned. Speed is unachievable. This won't do. There are 6 kilometers to Songyuan at this speed. It'll take at least another hour. Too slow. They cough, 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 tooey, haha. Upon hearing the worrisome words of Yuan Dao and others, the captured Zhou Yuan couldn't help but laugh aloud a few times. He even spat out a bit of bloody froth due to the intense laughter affecting his wounds, and then he slowly spoke. It seems you plan to head south through Songyuan realm and return to Wushuang. Carrying so much supply, you won't be able to escape. Long Mountain must have gotten the news by now. The army surely has already set out from Long Mountain, heading through Songyuan to block your path. Who won't miss sight of the convoy? He must have sent people to investigate in Changbai Gully long ago, and since you didn't cover the corpses, the Blood Guard army will definitely pursue you swiftly south from White Abyss. Due to his severe injuries, Zhou Yuan's breath was feeble, yet seeing Xia Chuan and others in a predicament clearly brought him some relief. He continued spitefully. Zhejiang siding with Long Mountain. There's no place for Great Xia in Longyu. Originally, if only Great Xia accepted fate and withdrew from Longyu land. But today, you've actively taken action against Long Mountain henceforth. Do you think I refrained from dealing with the corpses for fear of who's pursuit, and in a hurry to escape? Zhou Yuan's words were interrupted by Xia Chuan's retort before he finished. He froze momentarily, looking up at Xia Chuan with a puzzled expression. Otherwise, Hefi. Xia Chuan suddenly chuckled softly, then his gaze calmly fixed on Zhou Yuan, slighted shaking his head and said, "You are indeed loyal but too naive." Zhou Yuan waited for no continuation. As the cold resistance level leaders of Great Xia evidently sensed something, all raised their heads and looked to the east. Following their gaze, Zhou Yuan noticed a black figure speeding towards them from the snowy field on the eastern side. The figure in black moved swiftly across the snowy field, covering several hundred meters in less than a dozen breaths. Such speed! Just witnessing the speed exhibited by the figure made Zhou Yuan's pupils constrict and his face filled with shock, not to mention Li Yuanqing and Cheng He, who were weaker than him. Greetings later. Before Xia Chuan led Yuan Dao and others in saluting the figure in black, Zhou Yuan had already recognized the person as Great Xia leader Xia Hong, with whom he'd crossed paths previously in Gourd Valley. Long Mountain just sent people to White Abyss, who should already be aware of what happened in Changbai Gully. The Blood Guard army is pursuing us south. Clearly having rushed from White Abyss, Xia Hong spoke slightly out of breath. So soon? It's only been half an hour. Directly sending the Blood Guard army, who dares risk so much? Listening to everyone's words, Xia Hong shook his head with a smile and said, with 800 sets of 100-forged armor and weapons, who wouldn't feel the pain? Those 2 cold resistance levels from Long Mountain must have arrived home as well. Li Xuanling surely knows by now. Xia Chuan promptly answered. Li Xuanling knowing is useless. All 3,000 of Longyu army are in Long Mountain's base. Setting out now is too late. She can only send people from Songyuan's garrison to harass us. Amounts to nothing more. Upon hearing this, everyone relaxed significantly. The route for the Cloud Dragon army's return obviously necessitated passing through Songyuan. If Long Mountain wanted to catch up, it could only dispatch people from Songyuan's garrison. However, Songyuan's garrison lacks stationed Longyu army. Sending a group of ordinary earth-digging realm would be impossible to intercept the Cloud Dragon army. At most it'd serve as a harassment, indeed amounting to little concern. Lin Kai, go check south, see where the escort convoy is, have them speed up. The two forces must meet quickly. I expect Li Xuanling and Hu Hu will advance to locate the main army's position. The supplies must be offloaded swiftly. Understood, sir. Upon hearing, Lin Kai swiftly skirted the convoy's flank, rushing southward. Xia Hong watched Lin Kai leave, then turned to look at Xia Chuan and asked, "Have the strategic positions been chosen?" Xia Chuan's expression brightened. He nodded and said, "Already chosen, a place called Ningyuan Hill, right at the border between Songyuan and Changning, approximately 6 kilometers from here." Chapter 696, Chapter 288, On the March Hu Hu's Wrath. "All right," urged the army to speed up. "I'll keep an eye on things from behind." After saying this, Xia Hong suddenly looked down at Zhou Yuan not far away. Zhou Yuan seemed to have figured something out, his face in a state of uncertainty, staring intently at Xia Hong. "You guys didn't clear the bodies in the Changbai Gully on purpose, intending to lure Hu Hu's army into pursuit, and then ambush them halfway." Hearing Zhou Yuan's words, Xia Hong showed a faint smile, didn't explain, just nodded lightly. Zhou Yuan was taken aback but immediately sneered twice and continued, "Hu Hu isn't that stupid. Without verifying the location of your army, why would he recklessly pursue? Zhejiang's cold resistance level isn't lacking. Don't think only your great Xia can scout the enemy in advance. You'll soon find out." Xia Hong didn't bother to explain further, just waved his hand, signaling Yuan Dao and others to continue pressing them forward at a fast pace, while he himself darted to the north side. "All right, let's move quickly." Urged by Yuan Dao and others, Zhou Yuan could only move forward, but as he looked back at Xia Hong's figure disappearing into the snowy plains, his eyebrows furrowed even more deeply. From the moment Xia Hong appeared, he understood that Xia Chuan at most could be considered someone who leads troops in battle, but the planner of this large-scale battle was not him. The Changbai Gully battle was indeed brilliantly executed by Great Xia, killing over 60% of Long Mountain soldiers, capturing nearly 30%, and with their own casualties estimated at around 10%. If it weren't for his desperate fight, Song Ning, Li Yunkai, and those dozens of Longyu soldiers probably wouldn't have escaped. But even 10% casualties are still casualties. When he was captured, he carefully observed and estimated that Great Xia now has less than 900 combat-ready soldiers, and dragging along so much baggage, how could they ambush Hu Hu's 1,000 Blood Guard army? The crucial point is, the combat power of the Zhejiang Blood Guard army is comparable to the Longyu army of the same number, while their 1,000 new troops are on a completely different level, and Hu Hu, being extremely cautious, wouldn't easily fall into an ambush. Great Xia is definitely going to suffer big time next. At this moment, Zhou Yuan felt filled with resentment and was eager to see Great Xia's defeat. The Longyu 4 armies, established only a month ago, was destroyed by his own hands, and he was too ashamed to return to Long Mountain, having already harbored thoughts of death. The only thing on his mind now was to watch Great Xia's misfortune. "Transport team, spotted the transport team. Here they are, finally arrived." An hour quickly passed, and the Cloud Dragon army trudged southward through the snowy night, covering 4 or 5 kilometers. With a few exclamations from the front, the soldiers raised their heads to find a long line of troops from the south heading towards them. This troop was also about 1,000 strong, but unlike the Cloud Dragon army, where only 70% wore light golden armor, everyone in that troop wore light golden armor. Visually, the so-called transport team appeared much more impressive than the Cloud Dragon army, looking more like a proper military force. Great Xia has another army. How is this possible? At first sight of the transport team, Zhou Yuan was stunned, his face full of shock, but as the two groups drew closer and were only 200 or 300 meters apart, he carefully examined the transport team, and finally his expression began to relax. Their armor and weapons are the same, but their basic strength is only around 15,000, slightly higher at 20,000. They're not an army, just a transport team formed by ordinary earth-digging realm soldiers of Great Xia. The 1,000 Cloud Dragon army already exceeded Long Mountain's understanding of Great Xia. If they could bring out a force stronger than the Cloud Dragon army, he would truly despair. Zhou Yuan, with a slight shift in his mood, selected a dozen or so from the transport team, observing them closely, and discovered more. No, the weapons and armor are different, only the color is the same. This group is wearing armor and using weapons all at the 10 forged level. No wonder it's called a transport team, specialized for transporting baggage. Seeing the quality of the transport team, Zhou Yuan sneered a few times. Having dedicated people to transport the baggage, but so what? The Blood Guard army strength is evident. Even without the burden of baggage, Great Xia's odds of victory are minimal. Okay, just a few hundred meters left. Cloud Dragon army dropped the baggage and immediately follow Liu Yuan behind the eastern snow hill. Quickly, quickly. Upon Xia Chuan's command, soldiers of the 10 battalions of the Cloud Dragon army dropped the baggage and followed Liu Yuan towards a snow hill 40 to 50 meters high on the east side. As the Cloud Dragon army moved, the snowfield quickly became empty, leaving only 10 empty vehicles, scattered weapons and armor, and over 200 Long Mountain prisoners. Zhou Yuan was also among the captives. He turned his head to the right and noticed a portion of the transport team split off to erase the tracks of the Cloud Dragon army climbing the snow hill. He immediately realized that the snow hill, barely 40 meters tall, was the hiding spot for the Cloud Dragon army to ambush Hu's Blood Guard army. This is precisely calculated so that the Blood Guard army will follow the path they tread, chase all the way to the spot, and then they will suddenly appear from behind the snow hill and strike down from a height against the Blood Guard army. After understanding Great Xia's plan, Zhou Yuan's expression turned peculiar. To save time in pursuit, the Blood Guard army won't carve a new path and will likely follow the snowy path created by Great Xia, which holds little surprise. The question is, before Hu departs, would he not send scouts to check the snow hill? Most of Longyu is flat plains, and there are few places to hide troops in ambush. This snow hill is so conspicuous, how could Hu ignore it? Chapter 697, Chapter 288, On the March Hu's Wrath. How naive He! Earlier, Xia Chuan had only ordered Liu Yuan to lead the Cloud Jiao army up Snow Hill. He himself, along with Yuan Dao and other cold resistance level members, had not moved. Thus, Zhou Yuan's sarcastic taunt was clear to him. Xia Chuan's lips curled into a slight smile, ignoring Zhou Yuan. Only after the transport personnel had loaded all the war armor and weapons onto the vehicles, then divided into 10 squads to control all the captives, did he wave his hand. Continue heading south, now you can slow down a bit. Upon hearing Xia Chuan's last words, Zhou Yuan's expression first froze, then abruptly lifted his head, looking at the army heading south and the captives behind him. As if realizing something, his face drastically changed. He understood what Great Xia intended. It seems you're not dumb. Xia Chuan lightly mocked, just as the Great Xia transport personnel took out strips of fabric and gagged all the captives. Zhou Yuan's shock hadn't yet faded when Yuan Dao walked up to him, taking out a cloth to gag him along with Li Yuanqing and Cheng He. Yuan Dao, Chen Yingba, Wu Tangxing, you three remain here. At your command. After saluting, the three immediately headed up Snow Hill. The departing troops moved at less than half the speed of the Cloud Jiao army. Yet Xia Chuan, Chen Yingyuan, Peng Bo, and Lin Kai looked not anxious at all, occasionally turning to look behind them, full of anticipation. Unlike them, Zhou Yuan gagged, had pupils filled with worry, sweat dripping from his forehead, appearing extremely urgent. The departing troops were slower than the Cloud Jiao army, largely due to Xia Chuan's instructions, but more due to their limited military capability. This transport group of over 1,000 had basic strengths between 10 to 20,000, much lower than the Cloud Jiao army. Dragging so much baggage, they simply couldn't move faster. Heading south for an hour, they managed less than 4 kilometers. Just then, Xia Hong hurried back from the north. Hu brought people ahead of schedule, get ready. Upon rejoining, he didn't follow the group but first alerted Xia Chuan and the others, then turned north, adopting a waiting posture. Lin Kai, continue at this pace. Xia Chuan's expression slightly tensed as he ordered Lin Kai, then stopped with Chen Yingyuan and Peng Bo behind Xia Hong, waiting together. The four waited less than 100 breaths. The northern snowfield saw 9 figures appear in succession. All 9 wore blood-colored, light-emitting war armor, hurriedly advancing along the marching route towards them. With no obstructions in the snowfield, seeing these 9 figures naturally meant they too were visible to the opposition. Only 200 to 300 meters away did the 9 slow their pace, gradually approaching. Leader Xia Hong, unprovoked plundering of our Zhejiang supplies, isn't it excessive? As expected, these were from Zhejiang camp. Despite Hu lowering his voice, the fury in his final question was unmistakable. His furious expression revealed undisguised killing intent toward Xia Hong's familiar yet strange face. Xia Hong didn't hastily respond, first sweeping a glance at the eight beside Hu Hu, then lightly smiled at Hu Hu, saying, unprovoked, "Hu brother, your memory must be failing you. The Gourd Valley incident was less than 3 months ago. If you've really forgotten, maybe Hu Tong behind you can remind you." Hu Tong, standing behind Hu Hu, froze. Xia Hong's pursuit in Hankyang Gourd Valley, hunted by Li Xuanling and the Longyu army, he hadn't acted but was certainly among the participants. Hu Hu's expression darkened, aware that the ambush at Gourd Valley to kill Xia Hong was executed by Hu Tong under orders after Li Xuanling revealed Xia Hong's true identity. Xia Hong, think carefully. Our Zhejiang has allied with Long Mountain. Leader Li's original intent was only for Great Xia to withdraw from Longyu. If you truly steal these supplies today, it would indeed be declaring war against us two families. Zhejiang has allied with Long Mountain. Xia Hong hardly cared for the words following them, focusing on Hu Hu's revelation, filled with curiosity and confusion. In April, at a coalition meeting, Hu Hu almost died at Li Tiancheng's hand, with Zhejiang and Long Mountain readying for battle, almost engaging, if not for Great Xia's intervention. These previously incompatible families had allied, just to deal with Great Xia. Xia Hong's brow furrowed, not from fear of the alliance, but at the rapidity of the transition from hostility to alliance, an absurdly swift turn. His left eye flickered slightly, eyeing Hu Hu's group once more. The group showed no anomalies, no trace of reddish substance. Yet Xia Hong retained caution, remembering well the dewdrop plague could hide within human bodies. Seems like I'll have to personally test them. They unanswered for long. Hu Hu's side was not idle. Leader, similar to what Long Mountain just said, light gold armor, 10 large carts, 800 sets of 100 forged armor and weapons on them, likely Great Xia's army. Zhou Yuan, Li Yuanqing, Cheng He, wearing collarbone shackles plus those chained in the rear, must be Long Mountain captives, certainly them. They, Hu Quan, go inform the main army, speed up towards here. Their baggage slows them, expected to catch up in 2 hours. Understood, I'll go. Hu Hu hadn't considered threats could force Xia Hong to hand over the supplies. After instructing Hu Quan, he fiercely turned to Xia Hong, declaring, Xia Hong, Great Xia now lacks even the qualification to withdraw wholly from Longyu. Your army won't leave Songyuan realm, nor reach Wushuang. Huh? After long waiting, Hu Hu's threat was all he received. Watching them dare not approach, Xia Hong couldn't help but chuckle lightly. He drew his dragon sparrow saber, slowly approaching Hu Hu's group of 8. Rest assured, the army's rushing back. I won't let them intervene. As Xia Hong walked, he reassured Hu Hu's nerves. If the former contained light mockery, his next words showed utter contempt, reddening Hu Hu's group's faces, prompting them to draw weapons. Xia Chuan, don't intervene, I can handle it alone. Not just Hu Hu's angry 8. Even Xia Chuan's trio was stunned hearing this. 1 against 8, isn't that a bit exaggerated? Especially with Hu Hu among them. Trusting Xia Hong naturally, Xia Chuan first retreated aside. Chen Yingyuan and Peng Bo hesitated slightly, but seeing Xia Chuan's swift withdrawal, followed quickly. The trio watched Xia Hong's back with expressions full of anticipation. Finally, they'll witness the leader's true strength. Chapter 698, Chapter 289, Crushing, Stalling for Time, Ning Yuan Hill's Decisive Victory. Arrogant. Seeing the army had already marched a mile away, even if he turned back now, it posed no threat to him. Hu Hu finally couldn't hold back. Before the roar had completely dissipated, his silver-coiled dragon-pattern long stick pierced through dozens of meters, aiming straight at Xia Hong's face. Unlike knives, spears, swords, or halberds, the long stick has no edge. Such a straightforward attack should have extremely limited lethality, yet the reality was completely the opposite. With Hu Hu's immense strength added, the long stick stirred the airflow along its path, first forming a silver air column, with intense pressure driving the surrounding cold air to crazily rush towards the column in a short time. The rapid gathering of cold air unexpectedly formed a fan-shaped cold air shock wave centered around the stick tip, with a radius of more than 10 meters. SSSD, who says a long stick has no edge. Under Hu Hu's terrifying strength, the sharpness revealed at the stick tip instantly stunned all the surrounding spectators. Hu Hu gripped the stick with both hands, his eyes filled with coldness, and the unwavering stick tip reached Xia Hong's vicinity in an instant, just an inch from his chest. Even Li Tiancheng wouldn't dare act so arrogantly, and you dare, courting death. Hu is domineering and unruly by nature, respecting only Li Tianhua in his life. Even when Li Tiancheng's strength surpassed his, he remained unafraid. So, being underestimated by an unknown Xia Hong ignited the fire of anger in his heart, as expected. Yet despite all this, he wasn't overcome by rage. Xia Hong had once saved him from Li Tianhua's hands. The fact that Li Xuanling with the Longyu army and so many at cold resistance level in Gourd Valley couldn't kill him indicated Xia Hong's strength was highly likely above his own. Therefore, from the start, he used his full power. His grip on the stick alone showed this blow nearly concentrated all his strength, with speed and power overextending beyond limits, resulting in such momentum and impact. From the moment Xia Hong chose not to make a move initially, Hu understood there was no chance Xia Hong could dodge this strike. Bang! Everything unfolded as he anticipated. The stick tip reached Xia Hong's chest. But it stopped there. The subsequent development was nothing like he imagined. He clearly felt his stick tip pierced at most through Xia Hong's skin, not even reaching the flesh, before coming to a halt. As though hitting an indestructible wall, his long stick couldn't advance an inch, and he remained in a horizontal airborne state. Crack! The moment his palm cracked, Hu's expression drastically changed. A swift trace of fear surfaced in his pupils, and he immediately tried to retract his stick to retreat. Unfortunately, he could no longer pull back his long stick. 23 manes, less than 3 months, and increased by 7 manes. Xia Hong grabbed the stick with his left hand. A hint of surprise appeared on his face. Then his left hand exerted force, pulling Hu along with the stick in front of him. Then his right hand, wielding the dragon sparrow saber, suddenly flashed. Whish! An arcing cold glow cut through the night sky, rushing towards Hu's neck. Too fast. Xia Hong's saber stroke was incredibly swift. Not only Hu, but even the onlookers around couldn't see it clearly. It seemed like a mere lift of his hand, a blink of lightning, and the slender dragon sparrow saber had already drawn a line on Hu's neck. Leader! At a critical juncture, Hu immediately let go, dropping his long stick and fiercely kicked the ground, retreating rapidly. His strength couldn't compare to Xia Hong at all. Not only Hu, but Hu Tong and the others reacted at this moment too. Yet, instead of cowering, they drew their weapons and charged forward, blocking between Xia Hong and Hu. Hu, retreating to the safety zone behind, still appeared unsettled as he touched the fine knife mark on his neck, filled with fear in his heart. Had he not let go earlier, he might have already been decapitated. How is it possible? I attacked with full strength, yet couldn't even pierce through his skin completely. What strength does this Xia Hong truly have? Hu's exclamation wasn't even finished when danger struck again. Xia Hong, originally besieged by Hu Tong's group, suddenly wielded the dragon sparrow saber horizontally, breaking through the encirclement and rushing towards him. Clang, clang. Xia Hong didn't even intentionally use the saber to attack Hu Tong and the others. The saber glint generated during his forward rush already severed 3 of their weapons. The other 4 retreated just in time, avoiding the severing, but were affected by his forward momentum, causing their bodies to scatter to the sides, hands trembling uncontrollably. I told you all 8 of you should have come at once, yet you didn't believe. Now you're out of luck. Xia Hong was already standing in front of Hu, and after a subtle smile, he raised the dragon sparrow saber in his right hand, slashing diagonally towards Hu's right shoulder. Earlier, when Hu let go, he had already flicked the silver coiled dragon pattern long stick towards Xia Chuan and the other 3 behind him, so at this moment, Hu was weaponless. Leader Xia, don't. Hu seemed to have sensed the scent of death, his eyes filled with panic. Initially retreating in haste to avoid, but as Xia Hong continued extending the saber's edge, realizing he couldn't evade the strike, he immediately opened his mouth to plead. Upon hearing Hu's plea, Xia Hong wasn't surprised. In April during the Long Mountain Alliance, when Hu infiltrated Long Mountain to gauge the situation but was later pushed to the brink by Li Tiancheng, almost dying, he also shouted Master Tiancheng to plead for mercy from Long Mountain. Chapter 699, Chapter 289, Crushing Victory Buying Time, Ning Yuan Hill's Decisive Win. From this, one can see that although Hu has a domineering and unruly personality, he can put aside his pride at critical moments. With such adaptability, it's no wonder he developed Xia Hong into such a powerful entity under Long Mountain's nose. To some extent, Xia Hong had a bit of admiration for Hu Hu. Of course, admiration is just admiration. At this moment, Xia Hong had no intention of holding back. So he didn't give Hu Hu a chance to finish his sentence. He pressed forward, reversed his grip on the dragon sparrow saber, and sliced from Hu Hu's right shoulder to the left lower abdomen, carving a huge scar nearly 70 centimeters long and an inch deep. Thud! The splatter of blood from the wound was secondary. The immense force generated by the diagonal sweep of the dragon sparrow saber was taken entirely by Hu Hu, whose body flew backward several dozen meters, finally plunging into the snow and hitting the ground with a resounding crash. Bang! Leader! Leader! Hu Tong and the other 6 probably had never seen Hu Hu in such a state before. They stayed motionless for 3 or 4 breaths before reacting, fearing Xia Hong would take the opportunity to kill Hu Hu. The 7 gritted their teeth and charged forward, launching a second frantic round of attack. Quite loyal, what a pity. Xia Hong naturally saw through their intentions. He gave a cold snort, thick killing intent rising in his eyes, and first targeted the most powerful of the 7, Hu Tong. Even though that slash hadn't killed Hu Hu, it had cost him half his life, and he wouldn't be a threat in the short term. Since that's the case, he would settle the others first. 11 main strength. The others' improvements are all between level 2 and level 3. Earlier, Xia Hong's focus was entirely on Hu Hu. Now, carefully observing Hu Tong and the other 6, he realized that their strength had also increased significantly. It was unreasonably significant. Hu Tong had previously been at 8 main strength, and in just over 2 months he had improved by 3 levels. Xia Hong knew that even with an unlimited supply of Yangyuan pills, achieving this would be almost impossible, let alone with Xia Hong unable to produce Yangyuan pills. Cold resistance level cultivation could only rely on Jade bone medicine. Besides, Xia Hong couldn't possibly produce so much cold apple jade due to refined Jade bone medicine, and provide it to these people in unlimited supply. So how did these people improve so much? As this perplexing thought flashed through Xia Hong's mind, he moved swiftly. First, he used the dragon sparrow saber to deflect the attacks of the other 6, then suddenly charged forward, directly approaching Hu Tong, and with a powerful thrust, pierced his chest with the saber. Thud! The dragon sparrow saber, a 1000 forged level weapon, with Xia Hong's enhanced power, easily broke through cold resistance level skin and flesh, so the stab went through Hu Tong's chest without suspense. The moment the blade pierced flesh, Xia Hong's left eye flashed with a subtle light, focusing on Hu Tong's wound. Even though it was just a moment, Xia Hong's expression changed. As expected, the location where the blade pierced was filled with an extremely dense fiery red substance. The reason Hu Hu's group improved their strength so quickly was entirely due to that white Dugu's doing. It greatly increased strength without controlling the person. What was this white Dugu trying to do? And was it just Hu Hu's group of cold resistance levels, or did everyone at the Xia Hong camp have it in their bodies? That doesn't make sense. Is this kind of strength enhancement on a small scale, or could it be applied indiscriminately? If it could enhance everyone's strength while remaining hidden behind the scenes without exposure, then Xia Hong's future strength. If it's the same for Xia Hong, what about Long Mountain? Why did the 2 previously hostile groups suddenly form an alliance? This question in Xia Hong's mind suddenly had an answer at this moment. Immediately, a terrifying speculation surfaced in Xia Hong's mind. Drive wolves to swallow tigers. These 4 characters flashed across Xia Hong's mind, causing his pupils to contract suddenly. Hiss! He pulled out the dragon sparrow saber, kicked Hu Tong's body away, and immediately turned, taking the opportunity to pierce Hu Quan's chest once more, then continued using the same method to pierce through 2 more cold-resistant bodies. Indeed, they all contained the same thing, heavily indicating the presence of the dewdrop plague. Just as Xia Hong had reached a conclusion in his mind, he noticed that Hu Tong and the others had already begun seeking opportunities to move towards Hu Hu, clearly intending to escape. He certainly wouldn't give them the chance. Suddenly surged forward, quickly catching up to Hu Tong, stabbed through his chest's collarbone, then kicked him over to Xia Chuan and the other 3. Hu Tong, Hu Quan, and the 2 other unnamed cold resistance levels, all were already in a state of severe injury. Xia Hong's targeted assaults left them with no chance to escape, and they were each sent beside Xia Chuan. Of course, Xia Chuan and the other three understood Xia Hong's intention and swiftly restrained the four severely injured ones. The remaining three cold resistance levels who weren't significantly injured had already rushed to Hu Hu's side. Xia Hong turned and was about to pursue them, but as he did, his expression froze. Hu Hu had actually risen from the snow. The knife wound on his chest, 70 to 80 centimeters long, was still gushing blood, and deeper areas of his abdomen revealed visible organs and intestines spilling out. The life force of cold resistance levels was indeed tenacious, but to be injured so severely and still be able to stand by oneself seemed impossible. Moreover, Hu Hu didn't just stand. He was even fleeing north, supported by three other cold resistance levels. Chapter 700, Chapter 289, Crushing, Stalling for Time, Ning Yuan Hill's Decisive Victory. The tactics of the White Dugu are indeed too strong. If we allow it to continue, it might lead to a disastrous situation. Xia Hong had this thought flash through his mind, as he quickly got up to pursue Hu Hu and the other three. Three cold resistance level warriors with only 5 or 6 manes, along with a severely injured Hu Hu, trying to escape from his grasp was simply impossible. The extent to which the White Dugu can enhance cold resistance level strength is still unclear, but judging from the enhancement rate of Zhejiang's cold resistance levels over the past 2 months, the efficiency has been astonishing. Once this enhancement spreads widely, the great Xia could be in deep trouble. So it's best to kill them one by one. In less than 10 breaths, Xia Hong had already caught up with the 4 of them. With killing intent glinting in his eyes, Xia Hong did not hesitate. The dragon sparrow saber drew a cold edge, directly targeting the severely injured Hu Hu. Wish. However, just as the blade was about to cut into the back of Hu Hu's neck, the swift sound of an iron arrow tearing through the air suddenly rang by Xia Hong's ear. Clang! Xia Hong simply ignored the iron arrow, being able to discern who shot it just from the intensity of the wind noise. It was the divine archer named Yang Fengping from Gourd Valley. This also indicated that the people of Long Mountain had arrived. If it had been 2 months ago, he might not have dared to take this shot head-on. But now, Xia Hong directly braced against the iron arrow and continued to swing his saber towards Hu Hu. Clang! However, to Xia Hong's surprise, the iron arrow wasn't aimed at him personally, but rather at the dragon sparrow saber in his hand. The strength of the iron arrow wasn't particularly strong, only about 16 manes. Yet this force was enough to alter the direction of the dragon sparrow saber, making his cut deviate. Hu Hu stumbled forward, throwing himself forward desperately. Having narrowly escaped death, he couldn't be bothered about his image anymore, as the 3 cold resistance levels dragged him to hide at the back of the crowd rushing from the north. Leader Xia, you great Xia invaded Longyu first, occupying 1/3 of Longyu's land from the Beehive, Hankyang and Wushuang families, and now you seize our supplies and slaughter our allies. It seems you've set your mind to ignite war in Longyu. The people from Long Mountain were numerous, a total of 13. The leader was Li Xuanling, behind her were Li Xuanqiang and Li Xuandu, and the remaining 9 Xia Hong recognized as the stronger cold resistance levels of Long Mountain. The 13 came from the southwest, presumably departing from Long Mountain, passing through Songyuan realm before arriving here. They were slightly breathless, evidently having rushed over in haste. Having been promptly outmaneuvered by Li Xuanling, Xia Hong didn't react but instead watched the Long Mountain crowd with interest, focusing particularly on Li Xuanqiang, then looked directly at Li Xuanling, chuckling lightly as he asked, Long Mountain sent 800 sets of 100 forged level armors to Zhejiang. Surely, it's not just to enhance their hunting ability. Li Xuanling's expression faltered at the question. The implication of Xia Hong's words was clear. Long Mountain and Zhejiang were on the same side, aiming to oppose Great Xia. So what difference does it make whether or not Great Xia declares war? Indeed, since Great Xia dared to snatch this batch of armors, it meant they must have already known about Long Mountain and Zhejiang's alliance. Her earlier outmaneuver was indeed somewhat redundant. There must be a traitor within Long Mountain, likely among the more than 900 people in the earth-digging realm, whom Great Xia released from Gourd Valley last time. With so many in the earth-digging realm, Great Xia saying they released them was indeed suspicious. Similarly, Xia Hong also had more than 700 in the earth-digging realm released at that time, and there must be spies from Great Xia among them as well. At this moment, Li Xuanling's demeanor was highly somber. When Great Xia released those over 900 earth-digging realm individuals in late April, she had already sensed that there was a problem with this batch of people. The crucial matter was that, on the night of Gourd Valley, she had chosen to abandon this batch of earth-digging realm individuals on her own accord. Upon realizing they couldn't neutralize Wu Xing, who was under the control of White Dugu, she led several cold resistance levels to cover the retreat of Long Yu army soldiers and then fled herself, leaving the remaining earth-digging realm to be abandoned by her. Who would have thought that Great Xia would save all these people and eventually return them to Long Mountain? Li Xuanling and several cold resistance levels felt guilty towards these people, so even knowing there might be a traitor among them, they only dared to investigate secretly. But after more than 2 months, they hadn't found any problems, so Long Mountain decided to put this matter aside, not expecting the traitor to be so well hidden. Being able to ambush in Changbai Gully and intercept these 800 sets of armors on the way, it showed that Great Xia not only knew about the armors long ago, but also were clear about the delivery to Beiyuan camp. This batch of armors was kept extremely secret from construction to transportation, known only by people within the military camp, so the traitor is very likely in the new army. However, in the Battle of Changbai Gully, the new army was completely wiped out, with only over 60 people returning. Would Xia Hong still hide the traitor among these people and return them to Long Mountain? Looking at Xia Hong at this moment, Li Xuanling, though her face was as cold as frost and showed no emotional fluctuations, had her right hand resting on the sword hilt tremble slightly twice. Xia Hong, since you already know about Zhejiang and Long Mountain's alliance, then you should clearly understand that Great Xia no longer has a foothold in Longyu. As long as you return these 800 sets of armors, release Zhou Yuan, Li Yuanqing, Cheng He, and a group of Long Mountain captives, and then lead Great Xia to withdraw from Longyu. Henceforth Longyu and Redwood Ridge shall be divided by the Arrow Bamboo Forest, with our two sides leaving each other alone. How about it? Xia Hong looked up at Li Xuanling, a slight look of surprise flashing across his face. Although Li Xuanling's right hand tremor earlier was small, it didn't escape his keen eyes, so he was very aware that Li Xuanling must be at her boiling point of anger at this moment. Chapter 701, Chapter 289, Crushing, Stalling for Time, Ning Yuan Hill's Decisive Victory. Traitors, 800 sets of armor, the severely injured Hu Hu, and of course, most importantly, the newly formed army of Long Mountain that was established less than a month ago, now completely wiped out. The damage Great Xia caused to Long Mountain this time has certainly hit at the root. Yet Li Xuanling could still manage to keep her emotions in check. This woman indeed has some means. It's just a pity she used them on the wrong target. Xia Hong smiled faintly, a hint of contempt in his eyes, saying, whether Great Xia can ultimately establish itself in Longyu depends on strength, not on what you from Long Mountain decide. Just now, Hu wanted to talk me into handing over this batch of armor. He has already failed. Does Leader Li want to try too? Arrogant. Li Xuanling finally couldn't hold back, directly reprimanding Xia Hong. Just as she arrived, she had already seen Hu Hu's miserable state. Xia Hong's words clearly intended to warn her not to follow in Hu Hu's footsteps, which she could not miss. Li Xuandu noticed that the Xia army had walked very far. Almost only a silhouette could be seen, and he immediately stepped forward to softly remind Li Xuanling. Leader, the army is nearly 2 kilometers away from them. It's too late to turn back and help. We have more people. Let's just take action now. Take down this madman and force the Xia army to return to save him. Xia Hong's side only had 4 people, not counting the severely injured Hu Hu. They have 16 people here. If they don't make a move now, when will they? Li Xuanling didn't think she could take down Xia Hong directly. As long as she could force the Xia army to turn back and save him, it would count as a success. The Longyu army has already set off. It'll take about 4 hours to get here. No matter what, we have to hold back the Xia army. Otherwise, when they return to Wushuang, it will be troublesome to handle them later. Hu Hu, heavily injured at the rear, also spoke up to remind the people of Long Mountain. Alliance Hierarch, my Zhejiang Blood Guards have already set off too. They are no more than an hour away. We just need to delay the Xia army for a short period. Hearing this, Li Xuanling's eyes flickered slightly, and with no further worries, she directly led 15 cold resistance level members to charge at Xia Hong. The silver longsword drew a straight blade edge in midair. Li Xuanling, the strongest among Long Mountain, was the first to rush in front of Xia Hong, the swift slash aimed straight at his neck. Whoosh! The sound of the blade edge swiftly cutting through the air made Xia Hong's expression change subtly. He quickly raised his longsword and retreated to dodge. He remembered seeing Li Xuanling for the first time in April. She clearly only had the basic strength of 12. But this sound now was obviously not something 12 could produce. Clang! Xia Hong's avoidance only lasted less than 2 breaths before he was forced to a halt by Li Xuanxiang, Li Xuandu, and the remaining cold resistance level members. Li Xuanling didn't charge up alone. Realizing he couldn't dodge this slash, Xia Hong raised his dragon sparrow saber. At the first contact with Li Xuanling's longsword, he retreated another 3 or 4 meters. Knowing your weapon can't match mine, trying to deflect the force, dream on. Li Xuanling immediately saw through Xia Hong's retreating intention. After a cold laugh, her body pressed forward fiercely, her right hand's strength not diminishing at all, slicing down from above on the front of the dragon sparrow saber. Meanwhile, Li Xuanxiang and others caught her intention, suppressing Xia Hong from the sides and rear in 3 directions, leaving him not a single space to retreat, showing perfect coordination. With so many people restricting him, Xia Hong had no room to retreat. He could only raise the dragon sparrow saber with his right hand to block Li Xuanling's longsword. Of course, his left hand wasn't idle either. Xia Hong's eyes flickered slightly. His left hand struck with lightning speed, directly grabbing a snake spear thrusting at him from the left, pulling it toward himself, then delivered a direct punch to the owner of the spear's abdomen. The owner of the snake spear happened to be Li Xuanxiang. Bang! Li Xuanxiang's abdomen almost collapsed 20 to 30 centimeters, bursting out a spray of blood that splattered from his back, his whole body flying backward 20 to 30 meters, his pupils even slightly unfocused. Second brother. Luckily, Li Xuandu reacted promptly, running backward to catch him, retreating together another 20 to 30 meters, easing some of the force. Otherwise, Li Xuanxiang would surely die taking this punch head-on. Successfully striking down Li Xuanxiang with his left hand, the situation with the right hand was not so optimistic. Clang! Just as Li Xuanling had said, Xia Hong chose to dodge initially to deflect the force. He knew very well that the 1,000 times forged dragon sparrow saber he held was inferior to the silver longsword in Li Xuanling's hand. When the 2 weapons clashed, even if he had a strength advantage, he would not fare well. The dragon sparrow saber was struck by Li Xuanling's longsword, and without suspense, 1/3 of the blade was directly cut off. But after cutting off the dragon sparrow saber, Li Xuanling's face instantly became utterly grave, immediately withdrawing her sword and retreating. The reason was simple. At the instant the dragon sparrow saber was cut, Xia Hong held the remaining 2/3 of the blade and swung a terrifyingly menacing slash back at her. Whoosh! Li Xuanling retreated a full 5 or 6 meters. Even so, the air current stirred by the slash sheared several strands of her temple hair across the void. No wonder he could severely injure Hu. Xia Hong's basic strength is probably higher than second uncle's now, at least above 30. How could his improvement be so great in such a short time? Li Xuanling looked at the strands of black hair falling from her temple, eyes full of astonishment. Chapter 702, Chapter 289, Crushing, Stalling for Time, Ning Yuan Hill's Decisive Victory. She had an impression of Xia Hong's strength. In mid-April during the Long Mountain Alliance, Xia Hong saved Hu, and her second uncle Li Tiancheng said that his basic strength should be around 18 bristles. Later in Hankyang Gourd Valley, when Li Xuanling led the Longyu army to hunt down Xia Hong, although it was not possible to accurately judge Xia Hong's basic strength, it could be roughly inferred to be just over 20 bristles. Only a little over 2 months have passed, and now it's over 30 bristles. No matter what, I can only continue to trust second brother. If Great Xia continues to develop like this, Longyu will truly change hands, and that can't happen. Li Xuanling suppressed the horror in her heart, glanced at Li Xuanxiang. A struggle flashed in her eyes. She gritted her teeth and charged towards Xia Hong once more. Clang! Xia Hong's strength was indeed too strong. The dragon sparrow saber, with only 2/3 of its blade left, became even more agile in his hand. The remaining 15 people seemed to surround him, but without an advantage in weapons. they posed no real threat to him. Whether it was Li Chuanxiang's spear, Li Xuandu's broadsword, or others' weapons, even if they could skirt around Xia Hong's dragon sparrow saber and hit his body, they could at most break through his outer membrane, unable to injure his flesh. Such attacks were meaningless against cold resistance level. On the contrary, Xia Hong's saber strikes were terrifyingly fierce. Not only powerful, they could manipulate the surrounding airflow to extend the cutting range, and his speed was fast enough to unleash 3 to 4 frost blades every instant, covering every direction around his body. In a one-on-one, face-to-face confrontation, no one dared to take on Xia Hong's saber. Luckily, this group from Long Mountain was extremely coordinated. With mutual cooperation, they could entangle Xia Hong, preventing him from finding a breakthrough. Switching to another group of cold resistance-level fighters, it would likely be impossible to combat for such a duration. Swoosh! That's why Li Xuanling was eager to rush up. Only her silver longsword could pose a threat to Xia Hong on the scene. If she didn't intervene, considering the situation, not to mention escape, if Xia Chuan and the other three joined the fray, Xia Hong ultimately winning wouldn't be impossible either. That's right. Up to now, the battle had lasted nearly 2 hours. Xia Chuan and the other two hadn't even made a move. Chen Yingyuan and Peng Bo were fixated on Xia Hong, their faces full of horror and shock. Gulp! The leader's strength is actually this strong. 1 against 16, isn't that enough to hold the line? Li Xuanling even benefited slightly from weaponry. If he had suitable weapons, couldn't the leader keep all 16 of them here? Definitely, no one in Longyu can challenge Big Brother's current strength. Hearing Peng Bo's speculation, Xia Chuan responded decisively. Unlike Chen Yingyuan and Chen Peng, Xia Chuan looked at Xia Hong with only admiration and fervor, without surprise or shock, as if this scene seemed entirely normal to him. Then why don't the three of us just ditch these 4 and directly assist the leader in taking down the 16? Wouldn't that be better? Hearing Peng Bo's suggestion, Xia Chuan immediately shook his head. After a moment of pondering, Chen Yingyuan also gently shook his head. The basic strength of the 3 of them was around 8 to 9 bristles. However, among the 16 besieging Xia Hong, even the weakest was at 9 bristles. Thus, their intervention would offer very limited assistance to Xia Hong. In fact, their actions could attract the attention of those from Long Mountain, forcing Xia Hong to divide his focus to protect them. Therefore, the 3 opted not to move, just keeping their eyes on Hu Tong and the other 3. If Xia Hong truly needed help, he would naturally call for them. Moreover, our target isn't these cold resistance level folks. Xia Chuan's eyes flickered, involuntarily glancing north. Something's wrong. Why isn't he letting those 3 act? The longsword slashed through, leaving another scar on Xia Hong's neck, yet Li Xuanling showed no sign of joy. Instead, her brows furrowed deeper. From the moment she realized Xia Chuan and the other 2 hadn't acted, something felt off. Despite their lack of skill, Xia Hong was facing 16 opponents. Whether aiming to break through or fight for victory, letting 3 companions stand idle made no sense. Leader, something's not right. He could have broken through several times but hasn't. Is Xia Hong deliberately letting us enclose him? There seems to be a problem. If he wanted to escape, we couldn't stop him. He's intentionally dragging us here. Not just her, other cold resistance level fighters sensed the anomaly too. Fourth, something is definitely wrong. Li Xuandu spoke, stepped back, furrowing his brow. Suddenly, he looked up at the sky, his expression changed, turning to ask Hu behind him with shock. Hu, didn't you say the Blood Guard army would arrive in just over an hour? It's been much longer. Where are they? The question made everyone instinctively look up at the sky, realizing 2 hours had passed, leaving them all stunned. Hu, recuperating behind them, was startled, as if he suddenly realized something, looking at Xia Hong with horror, saying, "Wasn't that army passing behind you not the Changbai Gully force?" The 16 besiegers had all dispersed. As Xia Hong withdrew over 10 meters away, he first lightly straightened his clothes, looked at the dozen or so wounds on his body, consumed a blood sore pill, and then slowly raised his head to gaze at Hu, revealing a chilling smile. Chapter 703. Chapter 289. Crushing, stalling for time, Ning Yuan Hill's decisive victory. Smart but unfortunately a bit late. It's over. Hu felt a blackness before his eyes, his emotions too agitated, and the injuries he had barely suppressed were showing signs of resurfacing. Hu Ning, Wang Peng, Lu Yan, come with me quickly. Something happened to the Blood Guard army. He dared not hesitate any longer, stood up directly and rushed toward the north side, not forgetting to call upon the 3 cold resistance levels present from Xia Hong. Hu Ning and the other 2, who had just been besieging Xia Hong with the people from Long Mountain, immediately followed behind him, heading north together. The army we just saw was fake. It was Great Xia's deliberate ploy to confuse us. The army setting the ambush in Changbai Gully never came over. They ambushed the Blood Guard army halfway. This Xia Hong stayed here on purpose to stall us, making us think he was covering for the Great Army's escape. Something definitely happened to the Blood Guard army. The Blood Guard army thought the Xia army was fleeing south and must have been wholeheartedly pursuing them. If they were ambushed along the way, then the people of Long Mountain and others now realized what was going on. They all turned to stare at Xia Hong, their eyes full of fury. That army that was fleeing south just now wasn't ignoring them because they couldn't handle them. It was simply because they never had the strength. Yet they deliberately chose to attack Xia Hong only when that army was far away. Not only Hu, but even the people from Long Mountain were played by Great Xia. What a Xia Hong, what a Great Xia, Great Xia. Li Chuanling furrowed her brow slightly, clearly angered to the extreme. She always considered herself the #1 genius of Longyu, never regarding others highly in terms of strength or cunning. Even though Xia Hong's strength far exceeded hers at this stage, she believed that given time, she could eventually catch up to him. However, at this moment, reality gave her a brutal slap. Judging by tonight's series of encounters, in terms of strength and intelligence, Xia Hong seemed to entirely outstrip her. The new army is gone, and the Blood Guard army must also be severely weakened by now. In one night, Great Xia has crushed 2 armies in Longyu. It can't continue like this. The ruler of Longyu can only be Long Mountain. This major threat must be eliminated. Li Chuanling's gaze shifted again to her brother Li Chuanxiang, seemingly making some decision. A trace of resolve flashed in her eyes. Soon, a panicked voice came from the north side, making her expression even more determined. Alliance Hierarch, the Xia army is coming, run quickly. That panicked voice came from Hu. From the north side, Hu and the other 3 who had just fled were scrambling back in a rush. Hu's body was in an unusual state, almost being dragged by Hu Ning and the other 2. The 4 looked panicked, their faces full of horror, and they didn't run towards the south, avoiding the people from Long Mountain. Instead, they headed southwest, loudly urging the people of Long Mountain to flee at once. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Even across 2 to 3 kilometers, the sound of iron arrows tearing through the air from the north was exceptionally clear, instantly changing the expressions of the people from Long Mountain. No wonder the 4 of them fled so pitifully. At the end of the northern view, a rain of arrows was pouring down on them madly. Even from such a distance, the sound of iron arrows tearing through the air was so clear that any cold resistance level with a bit of experience could immediately tell that these iron arrows had an impact force of at least over 30,000 pounds, enough to threaten their physical bodies. Run! Li Chuanling dared not delay any longer. She turned back, gave Xia Hong a glance, and shouted for the group of cold resistance levels from Long Mountain to flee southwest. From the scale of the arrow rain alone, there must be at least 700 or 800 Xia army soldiers, which proved that their ambush on the Blood Guard army resulted in minimal casualties. If the 13 cold resistance levels stayed here, being surrounded by the great army, with the terrifying Xia Hong at the side, escaping would be as difficult as climbing to the heavens. Leader Ning Yuan Hill's great victory. The Cloud Dragon army killed 642 enemies, captured 142, including 2 cold resistance levels. The Zhejiang Blood Guards are now nominally extinct, haha. Li Chuanling and others hadn't run far when Liu Yuan's cheerful laughter reached their ears. The Blood Guard army is gone. In front, the 4 of Hu's faces suddenly turned deathly pale. The pupils of the people from Long Mountain constricted sharply, and their expressions turned instantly blood-dark and gloomy. Chapter 704, Chapter 290, Rich Harvests, Should We Store Land or Men? The price of the great victory at Ning Yuan Hill was clearly much greater than that of the ambush at Changbai Gully. The Cloud Dragon army rushing in from the north had only just over 700 men. Almost everyone had bloodstains smeared on their faces. The majority of them were wounded, with a few having serious injuries where blood had soaked through their armor. Xia Hong could even tell that most soldiers' archery arms were trembling violently, evidently due to the heavy load from the ambush at Ningyuan Hill. They hadn't recovered even by now. Yet even so, not one of these soldiers showed signs of fatigue, or rather their excited expressions completely masked the fatigue. To vanquish two Longyu armies in one night, the Cloud Dragon Army's first battle was simply perfect. Mind you, the Cloud Dragon Army had only been established for 20 days. Whether in cultivation, equipment, or training duration, they couldn't compare to the Zhejiang Blood Guard Army, let alone the new forces of Long Mountain. Moreover, judging by the number of enemies killed and resources acquired, the Cloud Dragon Army completely dismantled the two army structures. These were indisputable great victories. The overall plan for tonight's two battles, the specific tactics of the Cloud Dragon Army were indeed personally overseen by him, but the true executors were Xia Chuan, Liu Yuan, Yuan Dao and other cold resistance-level leaders, as well as the 1,000 soldiers who truly fought. It must be said, everyone's performance far exceeded his expectations, especially Xia Chuan, Liu Yuan, Yuan Dao. Their precise control over timing for deployments and ambushes was particularly impressive. What are the specific casualties? Xia Hong suppressed the excitement in his heart, calmed himself down, and then inquired about the specific casualties of the Cloud Dragon Army. Upon hearing this, Liu Yuan's expression sobered up a bit, and he said in a heavy tone, "Leader, in the battle at Changbai Gully, we lost 32 soldiers and had 52 seriously wounded. In the recent battle at Ningyuan Hill, we lost 69 soldiers and had 72 seriously wounded. Dead, 124 seriously wounded, a total casualty rate of nearly 20%. Compared to the massive victories gained tonight, it should be considered exceedingly low, yet Xia Hong's eyes twitched when he heard these numbers. Xia Hong was not blaming the Cloud Dragon Army for poor performance. Summing up the two battles tonight, the Great Xia's damage ratio could be around 1:17. Such a record cannot merely be described as perfect, it's outright miraculous. The Cloud Dragon Army's performance is flawless. He feels distressed for this 20% attrition. Long Mountain is well established, even without this new army. They still hold 3,000 elite Longyu army in their hands, sitting steady as a rock. The Great Xia, however, is different. There's only this precious Cloud Dragon Army. Losing just one is enough to cause Xia Hong soreness for a long time, let alone a 20% attrition. This has nothing to do with how many results were achieved. The essence is simply that Great Xia currently has very little capital. A 20% attrition is enough to make Xia Hong feel the pain of cutting flesh. We must find a way to replenish the troops. Relying on so few people, trying to continue fighting against Long Mountain will definitely not be possible. A sense of urgency stirred within Xia Hong as he surveyed the Cloud Dragon Army's ranks, then glanced toward the north and continued to ask Liu Yuan, "There are still people behind, right?" The total casualties of the Cloud Dragon Army were 225. There were only 725 here, clearly not matching. Liu Yuan nodded and said, "I brought the main forces ahead first. 142 were Zhejiang Blood Guard captives. 124 were seriously injured soldiers. The bodies of fallen soldiers, including all captured armor and weapons, are behind. Yuan Dao is leading 50 soldiers, bringing them over, about 5 or 6 kilometers away from us. Less than 4 hours until dawn. We need to hurry, Xia Chuan. Take 3 battalions of soldiers to assist Yuan Dao and his men. The rest depart immediately, head back to Wushuang first." Upon hearing this, Xia Chuan's expression became slightly stern, and he responded with a nod before immediately pointing out 3 battalions to hasten toward the north. If they haven't returned to Wushuang by dawn, they'll have to risk camping on the snowy plains. Additionally, Long Mountain has likely already moved their army to the Song Yuan stronghold, may even be plotting to intercept them. They must travel through Song Yuan to return to Wushuang territory as quickly as possible. As soon as Xia Chuan left, the remaining over 400 soldiers of the Cloud Dragon Army also set off southward on Xia Hong's orders, embarking on their return journey. Travel 7 kilometers south, then turn east for 4 kilometers, and you'll exit Song Yuan and enter Wushuang territory. Time should still permit. After calculating the time, realizing there was more than enough, Xia Hong immediately felt much more relaxed, joining the army as they hastened towards Wushuang. 11 kilometers of journey. At the Cloud Dragon Army's normal marching speed should take over 2 hours to complete, but since this path had been traveled once on the way here, the return speed was much quicker. In less than an hour, the 400 men caught up to the convoy ahead. Lin Kai was clever. He didn't stay with the convoy but instead kept 2 kilometers behind it, clearly to observe the surroundings and take preemptive action if necessary. The convoy's soldiers were merely ordinary earth-digging realm recruits transferred from Xia City, with few having basic strength exceeding 20,000, inherently lacking in prowess. With 10 large carts, 800 sets of 100 forged level armor and weapons as much baggage, plus over 200 seriously injured captives, their marching speed was naturally painfully slow. The addition of over 400 Cloud Dragon army soldiers immediately relieved much of their burden, significantly increasing marching speed. Finally taking just about 1.5 hours, the army exited Songyuan, entering Wushuang territory. Chapter 705. Chapter 290, Bountiful Harvest, Store Land or Store People /2. Entering the Wushuang realm, realizing that Long Mountain could no longer catch up, Xia Hong ordered Peng Bo to lead 2 battalions of soldiers to support Xia Chuan and others at the rear, to speed up their march. Finally, with an hour left until dawn, when the main force was only 3 kilometers away from the Wushuang camp, Xia Chuan and others at the rear finally caught up. When Xia Chuan's main force arrived at the rear, the soldiers of the 5 battalions, besides their own equipment, were almost all carrying 1 to 2 sets of blood-colored armor, a strong bow, and matching blood-colored arrows. Even the Blood Guard army prisoners being escorted were mostly laden with armor, clearly all spoils seized by the Cloud Dragon army. Xia Chuan was very excited, and upon seeing Xia Hong, he rushed up immediately. "Leader, let's talk after we get back." Xia Hong waved his hand, indicating to discuss inside the camp. An overwhelming force of over 1,000 troops, escorting over 300 prisoners, all entered the giant stone array camp through the entrance. Xia Chuan, leading a group of cold resistance level men, arranged all the prisoners properly and counted all the spoils, by which time the sky had already begun to light. Second year of Great Xia, July 1. Wushuang Main Building Top Floor Hall. A group of cold resistance level men stood on either side, while Xia Chuan stood below, reporting to Xia Hong with a jubilant expression about the gains from last night. In the battle at Changbai Gully, 742 Longyu army were killed, 221 captured, including 3 cold resistance level men: Zhou Yuan, Li Yuanqing Chenghe. Sets of war armor seized, 890 spears, 73 various 100 forged level weapons including swords, and additionally 2,000 forged level broadswords, 1,000 forged level longsword, and 10 iron carts with a carrying capacity of 2 million pounds, as well as 1290 healing pills. Of course, the most important gain was those 800 newly forged sets of 100 forged level armor. In the battle at Ningyuan Hill, 642 Blood Guard army were killed, 142 captured, including 2 cold resistance level, Hu Ming, Wang Lai. Sets of war armor seized, 754 broadswords, 30 various 100 forged level weapons including swords, and additionally 1,000 forged level lance, 1,000 forged level broadsword, and 1742 healing pills. Also, the 4 cold resistance level captives Hu Tong, Hu Quan, Zhang Qingyuan, and Lu Yin caught personally by Big Brother. Their weapons are all 1,000 forged level, consisting of 1 long staff, 2 broadswords, and 1 longsword. As Xia Chuan's words fell, the entire hall instantly fell silent. Everyone's breath became a little more intense. Even Xia Hong couldn't help but have a momentary daze in his gaze. No wonder, war is indeed the quickest way to seize resources. Not to mention anything else, just the 100 forged level war armor and weapons seized tonight alone totaled over 1,700 sets. Even if Mu Dong leads all the craftsmen in the camp to forge day and night, it might take several years to produce such an amount. But now, it was all obtained in one night. The previous shortage of war armor in the Cloud Dragon army was not only solved, but the surplus can even arm another 1,000-troop army. Unfortunately, the camp doesn't have enough earth-digging realm limit numbers. Otherwise, with these spoils, we could immediately arm another army. Currently, the only threat to us is the 3,000 Longyu army in Long Mountain. With another army, Great Xia would stand invincible. And if we can achieve another brilliant victory like tonight, swallowing Long Mountain whole might not be. Xia Chuan obviously had the same thought, but before he could finish his words, Xia Hong interrupted. Don't be too optimistic. If we can defeat Jie Yang, that would be good enough. Li Xuanling isn't a fool, and Long Mountain has no shortage of talent. These 2 victories tonight, replicating them in the future is practically impossible. Upon hearing this, Xia Chuan and the other cold resistance level men immediately became much clearer. After a moment of careful thinking, they all nodded lightly. Tonight's 2 victories seemed simple. But in reality, it was timely intelligence from insiders, Long Mountain's negligence, the ideal ambush locations of Changbai Gully and Ningyuan Hill, Xia Hong personally suppressing Hu Hu, holding back a large batch of cold resistance level from Long Mountain. There were so many factors determining victory and defeat. Any one of them could have changed the outcome significantly. Moreover, neither Long Mountain nor Zhejiang knew about the existence of the Cloud Dragon army from the start. Calculating with intent against a party unaware, Great Xia benefited greatly from this. Now that Long Mountain knows of the Cloud Dragon army's existence, they naturally won't be so foolish to fall for a trap again, so replicating the 2 victories tonight is definitely impossible. Cloud Dragon Army's war armor has now found a solution. Leave the spoils aside for now. The urgent matter ahead is to find a way to counter Long Mountain's offensive. Everyone, speak your thoughts. Upon hearing Xia Hong's words, everyone bowed their heads, sinking into contemplation. Given how badly Long Mountain suffered, it's not hard to guess their next move. Leader, reinforcing troops is imperative. Continue to transfer people from Xia City. Though the 3,000 Long Yu army are strong, if we can exploit Wushwang's terrain advantage and have a large number of personnel, holding them off isn't difficult. If Long Mountain insists on brute force, they will naturally retreat. Yuan Dao's proposal immediately received unanimous approval. Xia Chuan also nodded, continuing. Excluding Wushwang Xia City, along with the 4 posts of Jing Valley, Huayuan, Beehive, and Hankyang, the total number of Earth-digging realm people is at least over 10,000 now. If all are transferred here, defending against Long Mountain is no issue. If they make the unwise choice to persist stubbornly, we might even have an opportunity to counterattack. Chapter 706, Chapter 290, Bountiful Harvest, Store Land or Store People /3. Under Wushwang's command, aside from the Cloud Dragon Army, there was also the recently transferred escort team and part of the hunting teams. The total number in the earth-digging realm was around 2,500. After the martial arts competition was held in June, the number of earth-digging realm personnel in the Great Xia officially exceeded 10,000. Another month has passed, and the number is naturally increasing. According to Xia Hong's estimate, it should be around 13,000, so Xia Chuan's words basically hold true. If all the earth-digging realm forces of the Great Xia could be gathered here at Wushwang, then even if Long Mountain mobilized all its forces, it would be as difficult as climbing to the sky to capture Wushwang, let alone relying on just those 3,000 Long Yu army. Everyone clearly agreed with Xia Chuan and Yuan Dao's proposal. No one voiced any objections. After Xia Hong glanced at everyone, he slightly shook his head and finally turned his gaze to Xia Chuan, asking in return, "You just said that stubbornly defending Wushwang is an unwise choice. If that's the case, then by gathering all the earth-digging realm here at Wushwang, aren't we doing what you said, stubbornly defending Wushwang?" Upon hearing this, Xia Chuan's expression suddenly froze. Not only him, but Yuan Dao and the others were also taken aback, then looked at Xia Hong with faces full of confusion. Wushwang is the territory of the Great Xia. They're currently here, and Long Mountain will surely assemble a large army to attack. Isn't it obvious they should gather the earth-digging realm here to defend against Long Mountain's attacks? Seeing everyone's expressions, Xia Hong immediately knew what they were thinking. His expression was first a bit odd, then he changed his approach and asked Xia Chuan, "What is our ultimate goal in coming to Longyu?" "Of course, to annex Long Mountain." "And how can we annex Long Mountain?" "Defeat the 3,000 Longyu army, destroy the Longshan Li family, and all living forces loyal to the Li family." Xia Chuan's understanding is not lacking, especially since steering the Great Xia, as he's managed more affairs. Exchanges with Xia Hong have become more frequent. He's learned many new concepts from him. Xia Hong once personally stated that the most important thing when disintegrating and annexing a camp is to eliminate the biggest vested interest group within the camp. This rule applies to all camps in the Ice Abyss, including the Great Xia itself. Longshan Camp's overall structure was something Xia Chuan had already grasped through Li Hu and Yang Zhang, so he clearly understood that the Li family, holding 3,000 Long Yu army, was the uncrowned king of Long Mountain. Along with those loyal to them, they were the biggest vested interest group of Long Mountain. So that's why he responded in such a way. As he gave this answer, Xia Chuan clearly realized something, and his expression abruptly became stunned as he immediately reacted. Yes, the ultimate goal of the great Xia is to destroy the 3,000 Long Yu army, destroy the Li family, and all living forces loyal to the Li family, rather than stubbornly defending Wushuang. We need to recognize where our advantages lie. The military strength of Long Mountain is much stronger than ours. They have no fear of direct confrontation and will most likely raise an army to attack Wushuang. If we stubbornly defend here, it will play right into their hands. The great Xia can deploy earth-digging realm forces, but do you think Long Mountain can't? Zhejiang was initially just allied with Long Mountain, but now that the Blood Guard army is gone and who almost died at my hands, he will most likely integrate his entire base into Long Mountain. Once these two unite, they will surely outnumber our earth-digging realm. By then, whether Wushuang can be defended is truly uncertain. Xia Chuan, Yuan Dao and Chen Yingyuan seemed to understand, while others appeared to still be somewhat confused, all still in deep thought. Compared to Long Mountain, where does our great Xia's advantage lie? Xia City isn't in Longyu. Wushuang, Beehive, Hankyang, to put it bluntly, are just 3 outposts of our great Xia. We can come and go anytime, but Long Mountain can't. Their main base is on Long Mountain and it can't be moved. This time, it was Yuan Dao who spoke up in response. His words clearly awoke everyone. Xia Chuan, Chen Yingyuan, Peng Bo, and others suddenly all had an epiphany. It's a choice between losing ground to preserve people or losing people to preserve ground. Simply put, it's these two choices. In a world where civilization has fallen, it requires so many words to explain such a simple truth. Xia Hong immediately shook his head. Avoid the edge of the 3,000 Long Yu army. First, find a way to weaken Long Mountain's overall strength. As long as the battlefield remains in Long Yu, however the fight goes, as long as the great Xia suffers low casualties, it's always profitable, understand. Xia Hong now spoke in even more straightforward terms. Understood, I will now notify Meng Yi and Lu Yang to withdraw the logging realm from Hankyang and Beehive, leaving only the earth-digging realm in Longyu. In addition, instruct Zhao Long to bring all 1,000 defenders from Hankyang to Wushuang, awaiting orders. It's clear that Xia Chuan has completely grasped his meaning. Xia Hong lightly smiled and nodded, waving his hand to indicate for Xia Chuan to proceed. Chapter 707, Chapter 291, Infighting in Long Mountain, Li Tianqing's Caution. Longyu, Year 48, June 21. At Songyuan Station, chaos erupted on the side of Long Mountain. In the Battle of Changbai Gully, only 39 from the 4 armies of Longyu returned alive. The prestige of Long Mountain from the past 48 years was lost in a single morning. Zhou Yuan bears the blame. Just 1 month. The new army is gone, 961 Earth-digging realm limit forces, a quarter of the camp's foundation, they're just gone. A quarter of the foundation, dare you say? What about the thousands of sets of armor for the new army, and the 800 sets prepared to be sent to Zhejiang? Did you count those? That's already all the existing 100 forged level armor of the camp, including the healing pills distributed before departure, all now in the hands of Great Xia. Great Xia, those damned Great Xia, we must grind them to dust. The families of the soldiers who died in battle are all in the camp crying and clamoring, and there are more than 200 families of captured soldiers asking us to save them. What should we do now? How to save the more than 200 captured soldiers? Even Capital Commandant Zhou Yuan was captured, and there are 2 colonels, Li Yuanqing, Cheng He. We can't yet say if Great Xia has killed them. I told you long ago, making Zhou Yuan the new army captain wouldn't work. You insisted, and now such a huge loss. How to wrap this up? The new army is gone. Zhou Yuan must be clever. Given his strength, how could he be captured so easily? Probably having lost the battle and knowing he couldn't escape blame, he might as well have been captured deliberately, actually planning to switch allegiance to Great Xia. This, I said long ago, outsiders can't be relied upon. The good 4 armies were entrusted to Zhou Yuan, and now they're all gone, HMPH. On the top floor of the main hall at Songyuan Station, Over 50 people gathered, including almost all the cold resistance level experts of Long Mountain. Upon closer inspection, one could see that the positioning of these 50 people was somewhat clearly divided, with roughly 30 people on the left side and fewer than 20 on the right side. At this moment, all the individuals angrily speaking one after another were from the left side. They seemed to be discussing last night's great defeat in anger, but it was obvious they were all blaming Zhou Yuan, with several of the Li family members starting to spread filth about him, accusing him of deliberately being captured and eventually targeting the outsiders in general. Hearing this, someone on the right side finally couldn't stand it anymore. Song Ning, your son, and the 39 returning soldiers all said Zhou Yuan sacrificed himself to shield their escape, stubbornly fending off the Xia army, leading to his capture. Li Xuanping, are you just blindly lying with your eyes open? Is this appropriate? The speaker stepping out was Meng Ying, one of the 8 great Vajra of Long Mountain, who had always maintained a good relationship with Zhou Yuan. Naturally, he couldn't bear to hear everyone slander his old friend, so he spoke forcefully and pointedly at the accuser, Li Xuanping. In the Battle of Changbai Gully, one of the 2 cold resistance-level soldiers who escaped was Li Yuankai, Li Xuanping's son. So in truth, Zhou Yuan saved his son, yet at this moment, Li Xuanping is reversing the truth, accusing Zhou Yuan of intentionally being captured and planning to switch allegiance to Great Xia, clearly being ungrateful. This was the reason Meng Ying was so furious. But what happened next made him even more furious. Li Xuanping, whom he had named, showed no trace of shame on his face, instead directly stepping forward and coldly laughing. Song Ning and Yuankai have just broken through to cold resistance level, and a group of defeated Earth-digging realm remnants can't even be mentioned. Given Zhou Yuan's strength, even if he faked resistance, do you think they could tell? Meng Ying's expression froze instantly at these words. Not only him, but all the cold resistance levels behind him raised their heads angrily at Li Xuanping, clearly provoked to anger by his shamelessness. The more infuriating part was, Li Xuanping continued. Xiao Ning, Yuankai, did you really see clearly last night? Song Ning and Li Yuankai stood behind Li Xuanping, facing the intense gaze of Meng Ying and the others. Their eyes visibly avoided contact, eventually bowing their heads and choosing to remain silent. Shameless, shameless, shameless. Meng Ying was now extremely furious, pointing at the 3 of them, his body shaking with anger, repeating the word shameless 3 times. Meng Ying, no need to say more. Whether Zhou Yuan's capture was real or fake, I have no intention of investigating further, but the loss of Long Mountain's reputation and the huge losses from the battle must be blamed on him. From now on, none of you outsiders should expect to hold any military positions. With Li Xuanping's words, all the Li family members behind him immediately voiced their agreement. That's right, after this battle, who would dare entrust the new army to outsiders? That's right, military positions cannot be given to these outsiders. We should still discuss Zhou Yuan's crimes, investigate whether he was truly captured. Exactly, if he's found to have switched allegiance to Great Xia, not a single one of his relatives should be spared, all should be imprisoned. Bang! Li Xuanping, all of you shut up. Seated above, lost in thought with closed eyes, Li Xuanling finally couldn't endure any more upon hearing this. He slammed the table in front of him to pieces and angrily rebuked Li Xuanping and the others. It's a pity that his authority seemed somewhat insufficient. Young prophet, the alliance with Xia Hong was proposed by you. The formation of the new army was proposed by you. Appointing Zhou Yuan as the capital commandant was proposed by you. The shipment of 800 sets of armor to Xia Hong was arranged by you. You have been the leader for over 2 months, and we have listened to you in everything. Now that such a significant incident has occurred, you don't expect the council to only hold Zhou Yuan responsible, do you? Chapter 708, Chapter 291, Infighting in Long Mountain, Li Tiancheng's caution. Li Xuanping was not only the eldest son of Li Tiancheng, but also the head of the Li family's Xuan generation. Being reprimanded by Li Xuanling like this, his pride was clearly damaged, and he retorted sarcastically, even omitting to address her as leader. Li Xuanling was the youngest of the Xuan generation in the Li family, and although the term youngest was not incorrect, Li Xuanping was obviously intending to embarrass her by using it in front of so many cold resistance level individuals. The expressions of all the cold resistance level individuals present froze slightly, and the hall fell silent, the atmosphere suddenly becoming tense. Though Li Xuanling did not speak for a long time, the anger in her eyes as she stared at Li Xuanping was evident to everyone. Youngest, don't look at me like that. After all, you're just a woman. I admit you have some talent in cultivation, and your strength is unmatched in Long Mountain. Catching up to my father or even surpassing uncle in the future is not a big problem. But being the leader of Long Mountain requires more than just talent in cultivation. You're too emotional. When these outsiders complain a little to you, you hand over military power to them. Now that problems have arisen naturally, you must take responsibility. So, according to your opinion, who should be the leader? After speaking, Li Xuanling sat back in her chair and casually glanced towards the left at Li Xuanchen. As expected, Li Xuanping stood up directly and addressed everyone. Of course it should be the second young master, Xuanchen. He narrowly escaped death at Yangyuan Peak and brought back the vital Holy Sun Pill, a significant contribution to Long Mountain. Moreover, since the eldest young master failed to inherit the leadership position, by order of succession, the position should rightfully go to the second young master. Don't you all agree? Li Xuanping directed his final inquiry to the left side, where the core members of the Li family were, clearly trying to drum up support. The core members of the Li family immediately understood and chimed in one after another. That's right, the young master is a woman, unsuitable to lead. The second young master should inherit the leadership position, I agree. Since the eldest young master lost the position, it should naturally pass to the second young master. The eldest young master was originally the designated successor. Since he is not taking the position and given the order of seniority, it should go to the second young master. Although the young master is strong, she is ultimately still a woman and will eventually marry off. It's appropriate for the second young master to be the leader. A flash of fatigue crossed Li Xuanling's eyes as she looked at the group of core Li family members beneath her, feeling both pity for their short-sightedness and deep concern for the future of Long Mountain. Long Mountain was not decided solely by the leader. It implemented the council system left by her father, Li Tianhua. In simple terms, anyone who reached the cold resistance level automatically became a council elder, joining the council to participate in discussions and decisions on all major camp matters. As Long Mountain grew stronger, the council also expanded and gradually began to split into factions of the core Li family and outsiders. The core faction, led by Li Xuanping, the eldest son of the second uncle, included the core Li family members and the in-laws from the Cheng, Song, and Yang families, holding 34 seats. The outsider faction was represented by Zhou Yuan, Meng Ying, Yue Kaiyan, Zhang Ping, Sun Yan, and He Tu, 6 of the Longshan 8 great Vajra who had not intermarried with the Li family, holding 18 seats. The conflict between these two factions was not new, but when her father Li Tianhua was present, he could control the situation, so the factions rarely dared to openly clash. However, since her father Li Tianhua left, the second uncle Li Tiancheng, lacking authority and somewhat biased towards the core family, saw tensions between the factions heighten, and the situation gradually began to spiral out of control. She was well aware that ever since she took on the leadership role, Li Xuanping and the core members of the Li family had been opposed to her, even approaching the second uncle Li Tiancheng multiple times to advocate for her replacement. Yet she never expected that these people would be foolish enough to challenge her at such a critical moment. Long Mountain had been severely damaged. The Zhejiang Blood Guard army had been entirely wiped out. Great Xia remained watchful and hostile, and in the face of a great enemy, these Li family members were not considering how to deal with others, but instead were using this opportunity to eliminate dissidents, even attempting to oust her as leader. The key point was that they were endorsing Li Xuanchen. Li Xuanling turned to look at Li Xuanchen, who had adopted an indifferent, uninvolved stance, causing a chill to rush through her heart. In early May, Li Xuanchen and over 400 Longyu army soldiers escaped death from Yangyuan Peak to return to Long Mountain. Although they had passed the silver and solidified fire oil tests, Li Xuanling and the second uncle Li Tiancheng remained wary of him, particularly regarding the Holy Sun Pill. Even though she had taken it and personally experienced its rapid enhancement of abilities, Li Xuanling remained uneasy. The Dan medicine posed no problem, but that didn't mean the person was also without issues. Mainly because the night at Gourd Valley, when Wuxing was controlled by the White Dugu, left a significant psychological shadow on her, coupled with the natural human fear of deceitful monsters, she couldn't bring herself to fully trust Li Xuanchen. who knew if this Li Xuanchen was still her original second brother. She had already secretly discussed with the second uncle Li Tiancheng that since the camp was free of the dewdrop plague, as long as Li Xuanchen didn't display abnormal behavior and was willing to provide the Holy Sun pill to strengthen Long Mountain, they would temporarily let their guard down. Chapter 709, Chapter 291, Infighting in Long Mountain, Li Tiancheng's caution. Who would have thought that Li Xuanping and his group of fools would now actually aid Li Xuanxiang in attacking me? Thinking about it, it's understandable. Li Xuanxiang could bring out so many Holy Sun pills, easily winning over those of cold resistance level in the camp. Even if he doesn't show his intention to become a leader, these fools could not help but push him to the top. Li Xuanping, don't think you can make baseless accusations. The responsibility for the new army's defeat, even if someone needs to bear it, it should be Zhou Yuan, Li Yuanqing, and Cheng He. What does it have to do with Leader Guan? Seeing Li Xuanling silent for a long time, assuming she was intimidated by Li Xuanping and his men, Jiang Ping stood out. He likely heard something from those new soldiers who escaped and continued to angrily accuse. Regarding last night's army defeat, some returning soldiers have said that 4 colonels repeatedly did not follow Zhou Yuan's orders. Li Yuanqing and Cheng He, while scouting routes, did not follow protocol, went too far, were captured by Great Xia, and failed to report back in time. This ultimately led to the army falling into an ambush. You avoided mentioning any of this and instead placed all the blame on Zhou Yuan. What are your intentions? Hearing this accusation, Li Yuankai and Song Ning's expressions both slightly changed, and they quickly stepped forward to refute. Uncle Jiang, who told you this, let him come over for a confrontation. Yuankai bets his life that no such thing happened. Uncle Jiang, if you're attributing the blame for the army's ambush to me based on hearsay, that's hardly fair. I also think that soldiers should come here for a face-to-face confrontation to see if it's true. Hearing the two of them ask to bring the soldier for a face-to-face confrontation, Jiang Ping and the others were momentarily stunned, too angry to speak. To call an earth-digging realm soldier here to confront them, let alone whether he dares, even if he dared, Jiang Ping wouldn't play the villain. What is it, can't bring him here? Or are you saying that all those words just now were Uncle Jiang's fabrications used to frame me and Song Ning? Jiang Ping making baseless claims without evidence, even if you want to help Zhou Yuan, this isn't the way to do it, huh? Indeed, Zhou Yuan is already captured, and there's no. Li Xuanping couldn't help but sneer again, but just as he was about to continue, an old voice from outside interrupted him. With the enemy before us, why are you still arguing here? Li Tiancheng has arrived. Everyone in the hall immediately fell silent. Li Xuanling, sitting at the head, who felt utterly exhausted, finally showed a bit of relief. Father Xuanling cannot be this. Li Xuanping spoke again, but just as before, Li Tiancheng interrupted him before he could finish. Slap. Moreover, he used a slap. Li Tiancheng stared at his eldest son with a disappointed expression, and finally, he could only sigh and turn to everyone. With external threats upon us, are you intent on handing over the 50-year legacy of Long Mountain to others? I don't care what you're thinking now, just shut your mouths. The most important thing right now is to drive Great Xia out of Longyu and restore the prestige of our Long Mountain. I've seen that Xia city at Redwood Ridge with my own eyes. That Xia Hong is no ordinary person, and Great Xia's overall strength far exceeds your imagination. Everyone, listen to me carefully. Whether you belong to the Li family or are an outsider, if Long Mountain loses this time, all your current power struggles will be nothing but a joke. Do you understand? Li Tiancheng's final question was forceful and resounded in everyone's ears. Everyone's faces changed, looking up at the seriousness and solemnity on Li Tiancheng's face, and they all felt a jolt in their hearts. To be honest, even though everyone was arguing fiercely just now, they hadn't taken Great Xia seriously. They knew their own strength. Although Great Xia destroyed the new army and Blood Guard army, in the end, it was just a 1,000-man army, and they must have suffered considerable losses in the 2 battles last night. Long Mountain still has 3,000 Longyu army. The reason everyone dared to argue here, even daring to point the blame at Li Xuanling, was based on the premise of never taking Great Xia seriously. The consensus was that, when night falls, the army would set off to Wushuang destroy Great Xia, a view shared by everyone present, possibly including Li Tiancheng, who arrived at Songyuan last night. But what did Li Tiancheng just say? The most important thing right now is to drive Great Xia out of Longyu. driving out and destroying, are two completely different matters. Xia City. What did Li Tiancheng see at Redwood Ridge to make him so cautious? Chapter 710, Chapter 292, White Dugu's Open Plot, Long Mountains Advance. The Holy Sun Pill. On the top floor of the Wushuang main building, Xia Hong, seated at the head position, slightly narrowed his eyes. Below, Yuan Dao continued, "It's called the Holy Sun Pill. I have interrogated 9 people separately. Li Yuanqing was the first to confess. He said this Holy Sun Pill was brought back by his father, Li Xuanchen, from Yangyuan Peak. It's a cold resistance level cultivation holy item, its effects surpassing the Jade bone medicine by dozens of times. Many in Long Mountain have consumed it. Zhejiang is similar according to the confessions of Hu Ming and Wang Lai. Hu was determined to join Long Mountain after taking the Holy Sun Pill given by Li Xuanchen. So, the reason for the recent surge in strength of these two families, cold resistance level, is entirely due to this Holy Sun Pill. Do they have any extra Holy Sun Pills on them?" Yuan Dao shook his head and said, "All have been searched, there's none." Indeed, such a precious Dan medicine must be limited in quantity. Once distributed, it's probably used for cultivation right away. Who would keep it on them? Yuan Dao thought of something and continued to report, "I just tested them with solidified fire oil, and nothing happened to the 9 of them." Upon hearing this, Xia Hong nodded slightly, his expression growing more serious. The reason for the significant enhancement in the cold resistance level of Long Mountain and Zhejiang is the Holy Sun Pill. And this Holy Sun Pill was brought back by Li Xuanxiang, who escaped from Yangyuan Peak alive. It's no surprise that Li Xuanxiang is inevitably connected with the White Dugu. As for why solidified fire oil couldn't reveal any problems, that's quite normal. Long Mountain does have solidified fire oil, and Li Xuanling is not foolish. According to the messages from Li Hu and Yang Zhang in May, after Li Xuanxiang's group escaped back from Yangyuan Peak, Li Xuanling had them stay outside the camp for 7 days. Various methods were used to test them before confirming there was no issue and allowing them in. This message is enough to explain that Li Xuanling holds an extremely cautious attitude towards Li Xuanxiang. It's just that the White Dugu's methods are becoming more advanced, so much so that even solidified fire oil and silver can't reveal it anymore. There is definitely a problem with this Holy Sun Pill, and more with Li Xuanxiang. It seems Li Xuanling and the people of Long Mountain have all been deceived by that White Dugu. The first to doubt that the White Dugu wasn't dead was Yuan Dao, and as one of the witnesses of the Yangyuan Peak incident, he remained most wary of the White Dugu, making this judgment directly. Unexpectedly, Xia Hong immediately refuted his words. "I can confirm that the 9 people who consumed the Holy Sun Pill have no issues. They do have dewdrop plague within them, but it won't spread to others. Moreover, even after the dewdrops are cleared, their strength won't decline." Upon hearing this, Yuan Dao's expression suddenly tightened. He certainly didn't doubt Xia Hong's words. Small fire torches and solidified fire oil, both materials with strong restraining effects on deceitful monsters, are produced by the Cold Ruins tripod, whose owner is Xia Hong. Therefore, Xia Hong must have some basis for making this judgment. But if the Holy Sun Pill is without issue, then why would Li Xuanxiang or the White Dugu manipulating him bring it out for the cold resistance level of Long Mountain and Zhejiang? The idea that a deceitful monster is helping humans enhance their strength is very. Yuan Dao suddenly realized, and his face changed dramatically as he exclaimed, "Leader, are you saying that the White Dugu is enhancing the cold resistance level strength of both families specifically to deal with us, the great Xia?" Xia Hong nodded directly and sneered. Otherwise, how did the two families, previously at each other's throats, quickly reconcile and ally? As a normal person, if you had such a spirit pill like the Holy Sun Pill, would you share it with the people in the camp? Those 800 sets of 100 forged level armor are clearly prepared for warfare. Yuan Dao bowed his head in thought for a moment, and with the information Xia Hong brought back from Yanglu Forbidden Land 3 days ago, he suddenly realized it all. As the leader said, the White Dugu summoned a massive number of cold beasts, turning the entire Yanglu area into a forbidden zone to protect its true form. This at least explains 2 points. First, it cannot leave Yangyuan Peak to freely roam outside yet. Second, it's not in an invincible state right now and is very afraid of anyone approaching Yangyuan Peak. Yuan Dao paused for a moment, unraveling the complexities, and continued, "That White Dugu has already witnessed solidified fire oil, and it might even know about the cold ruins tripod. Moreover, the Wuxing it previously controlled was killed by you, leader, in Hankyang Gourd Valley. It knows very well that the only threat to it in the entire Longyu is the Great Xia, but since it can't come out itself, it can only control Long Mountain and Jieyang from behind the scenes to go against us. Using the Yangyuan pill not only helps enhance the cold resistance level strength of the two families to oppose us, but it can also use this to win people's hearts and control both families. After listening to Yuan Dao's insightful analysis, Xia Hong did not hide his appreciation at all, turning to continue adding, the White Dugu is definitely still afraid of solidified fire oil, so it doesn't dare to recklessly spread the dewdrop plague foolishly. It can only utilize Long Mountain and Jieyang, both human, to first target us. Unable to hold back, Yuan Dao immediately said, Leader, we must go and inform Li Xuanling at once, to prevent falling into the conspiracy of the White Dugu. Do you think Li Xuanling is that foolish? Are all people of Long Mountain muddle-headed, with no one clever? Yuan Dao's expression froze for a moment. After understanding the reasoning, his expression immediately became much more somber, softly saying, This White Dugu, such deep scheming. This is not a conspiracy, but a perfectly executed open plot. The White Dugu is well aware that Long Mountain must deal with the Great Xia, using the Holy Sun pill as the bait. Even if Li Xuanling suspects something, he can only temporarily follow along with its plans, joining forces with Jieyang to deal with the Great Xia together. Chapter 711, Chapter 292, White Dugu's Open Plot, Long Mountain's Advance. With the Holy Sun pill, that White Dugu will definitely use Li Xuanchen to secretly win over the majority of cold resistance level from both families. Li Xuanling should have calculated this point long ago. To deal with Great Xia, she is willing to spend heavily, Xia Hong's eyes flickered with gloom. The taste of being manipulated by White Dugu was naturally unpleasant, but this was not yet severe. The key was Li Xuanling and also that group from Long Mountain. To maintain their ruling position in Longyu, they were willing to be driven by deceitful monsters, which made him very annoyed. If deceitful monsters grow too powerful, the harm to humans is essentially unlimited. At the beginning of White Dugu's resurgence, just using the spread of plague could massacre the Yanglu camp with nearly 30,000 people, and there was also the subsequent tragedy at Hankyang Gourd Valley. If not for Great Xia using solidified fire oil to save people, likely none would have survived. In such a situation, Li Xuanling still dares to let White Dugu go unchecked. Clearly in this woman's heart, maintaining Long Mountain's hegemonic position surpasses everything. Wanting to rely on deceitful monsters to maintain Long Mountain's hegemonic position, this woman is also blinded by greed. It's just a pity that Long Mountain and you are destined to be trampled under my feet. Xia Hong's eyes flickered with disdain, no longer dwelling on Li Xuanchen and White Dugu's matters, first raised his head to glance at the sky outside, then turned to the giant map of Longyu behind the main seat, asked in a deep voice, Have Xia Chuan and Peng Bo returned yet? Yuan Dao knew Xia Hong was about to start deploying. His expression brightened as he replied, Minister came back half an hour ago. He is currently leading Chen Yingyuan and others in a 3-kilometer vigilance around the camp, strictly preventing Long Mountain from scouting our situation. Peng Bo just returned, bringing 15 cold resistance level in total. Also, according to him, Xia City has already been notified. A large number of earth-digging realm are starting to pack up, and will head to Jing Valley to Longyu overnight at the fastest speed. During the day in Ice Abyss, there are only 2 hours. Xia Chuan ran separately to Hankyang and Beehive places. Peng Bo went to Xia City and time basically passed. Now it's less than an hour until dawn. Xia Hong pondered for a moment, then said, You go now to notify Zhao Long. Isn't he going to lead the army through Xia direct path overnight? Have him make a commotion when approaching Wushuang. Definitely let the people from Long Mountain know. Yuan Dao only pondered for a moment before quickly understanding, showing a smile. Yesterday Xia Hong indeed said that Wushuang does not need to be firmly defended, so the reason for having Zhao Long purposely make noise is not hard to deduce. Notify everyone on Wushuang after nightfall. Start quietly moving batches through Xia direct path to Beehive. Strive to transfer everyone before Zhao Long's army arrives, leaving only 1,000 Cloud Jiao army and all cold resistance level. The interconnected direct paths of Hankyang, Beehive, and Wushuang have been completed. Zhao Long's 1,000 people will arrive quickly after nightfall. Notify Xia Chuan to relax vigilance at that time. It's best to let Long Mountain spies see we have reinforcements moving toward Wushwang. That's all, go handle it. Understood. Yuan Dao acknowledged with a bow, then swiftly turned and exited the hall. 3,000 Longyu army must all be gathered at Song Yuan base. After nightfall will press toward Wushwang. It's just a pity they don't have direct path. Even if they send people ahead to open the way, the marching speed is extremely slow. As long as I give them misinformation, my operational space is large. There's no way to lose this battle. Xia Hong continued to look at the map, pondered for a moment, then showed a confident look in his eyes. The 48th year of Longyu, June 21, dusk before nightfall. Songyuan Base Main Hall. Li Xuanling still sat at the main seat. Li Tiancheng was at the foremost position on the lower left. After Li Tiancheng's previous mediation and admonition, the atmosphere among Long Mountain's cold resistance level was noticeably improved. Everyone sat upright, focusing their eyes on Li Xuanping, Li Xuanqiu, Meng Ying, and Cheng Guang in the center. All four of them were covered with snowflakes, obviously just returned from outside. Li Xuanping was the first to stand out, bowing. I went to the north side of Wushwang, at least sensed 5 cold resistance level auras. They seemed to sense me too, immediately surrounded me. Although their strength isn't strong, I'm worried Great Xia might have more reinforcements coming, so I came back first. Meng Ying was the second to say. I went to the south side with 6 cold resistance level. The situation is similar, also discovered before getting close, could only retreat. Li Xuanqiu was a rare female among the cold resistance level, standing third to bow. I went east, also 6 cold resistance level. The last was Cheng Guang, with the most solemn expression, bowing. I went west. Great Xia deployed at least 10 cold resistance level in this direction, and the distance ahead is very far, clearly meant to prevent us from scouting the camp situation. Well, as the four spoke, a stir instantly filled the hall. Great Xia has so many cold resistance levels. That's already 27, not counting leader Xia Hong. This is more than Jiayang's cold resistance level. This is still only the part Great Xia dispatched to Longyu. Might Great Xia have more cold resistance levels than our Long Mountain? Not necessarily. Wasn't the second uncle saying Xia City lies far east of Redwood Ridge, in the canyon west of Twin Dragon Mountain? Judging from the size of the fortress, the population surpasses 10,000. 27 cold resistance level might truly not be all their strength. I remember there were clearly no people at Redwood Ridge. When did such a strong camp emerge there? This. Chapter 712. Chapter 292. White Dugu's open plot, Long Mountain advances. Over an hour ago, Li Tiancheng described to them everything he had seen of Xia City. A total of 10 kilometers of black stone, walls on 3 sides. Xia people dressed in various attires, freely coming and going at the outskirts of Redwood Ridge. A densely packed hunting team, emerging en masse after nightfall. Countless iron ores and coal stone being transported into Xia City from various places. In fact, Li Tiancheng had not successfully infiltrated Xia City. He had only glimpsed some scenes from the perimeter, yet even the partial imagery he depicted astonished the cold resistance level members present. The Long Mountain people initially thought that the Great Xia was similar to those other giant camps in Longyu. Even if they deployed the Cloud Dragon army this time, they believed that Great Xia's strength was at most comparable to Jiayang and still had a considerable gap with Long Mountain. But after hearing about Li Tiancheng's observations, they realized that wasn't the case. The scene at the Great Xia station was visibly much better than Long Mountain, with a population greater than Long Mountain, and possibly even more members of the hunting team and earth-digging realm than Long Mountain. They were already somewhat anxious, and upon hearing about the Wushwang situation that Li Xuanping and the others had scouted, their expressions became a bit tense. The strength of Great Xia clearly exceeded their imagination. It can be confirmed that within 3 kilometers surrounding Wushwang, Great Xia has at least stationed over 27 cold resistance level guards. Our people couldn't even get close. Trying to spy on the situation inside the Wushwang camp is even more impossible. Li Xuanling's expression was also very serious, evidently taken aback by the number of cold resistance level members in Great Xia. Seeing that some people below were starting to appear uneasy, she furrowed her brow and said in a deep voice, "No matter how large their cities are or how strong they are, they're still over by Redwood Ridge. This is Longyu. our home ground in Long Mountain. Even if they're a dragon, they have to coil obediently here. She paused at this point, then changed her tone and continued. Moreover, Great Xia only has one cloud dragon army in Longyu. Just with this alone, Great Xia could never defeat our Long Mountain. The people below, upon hearing Li Xuanling's words, contemplated briefly and then were suddenly invigorated, their eyes lighting up. That's right. At Changbai Gully and Ningyuan Hill, the two battles of the Cloud Dragon army last night were indeed well executed, but they adopted ambush tactics, and midway, they used other ordinary earth-digging realm members as lures and distractions, with Xia Hong personally covering. This basically confirmed that besides the Cloud Dragon army, Great Xia had no second formal army, or even if they did, they couldn't mobilize them to Longyu. In that case, Long Mountain's chances of victory were quite high. The inability to spy on the situation inside the Wushuang camp doesn't affect our advance. After receiving the news last night, we immediately sent people to investigate. There are about less than 2,000 Earth-Digging Realm members inside. Counting the 1,000 Cloud Dragon army, the total number does not exceed 3,000. With so few people, there's no way they can block 3,000 Longyu army. Li Xuandu spoke first, and everyone slightly nodded. Li Xuanling also nodded. After the news from Changbai Gully returned last night, she was the first to order people to explore the Wushuang camp situation, so she knew the number of people well inside Wushuang also. No matter what plan Xia Hong has, our army will directly press forward. With brute force, he either evades or fights. Those are his only two options. Placing so many cold resistance level members for perimeter vigilance might just be a bluff to make us think he has some ambush preparations, discouraging us from advancing easily. After Li Xuanling finished speaking, she glanced at the already darkened sky and directly ordered, "It's night now, gather the army and set off. Order people to clear the snow path ahead, all cold resistance levels group explore the route conditions along the way, and be sure to arrive within 4 hours, giving enough time for battle. Tonight, we will completely expel Great Xia from the Wushuang realm." Songyuan is to the west of Wushuang, with a straight-line distance of 18 kilometers between both camps. However, the path requires some detours, bringing the total distance to about 25 kilometers. With the march speed of the Longyu army, 4 hours should suffice. Li Xuanling thought of something else and said to the four in the center, Li Xuanping included, "You four, each take a cold resistance level member and continue watching the 4 directions of Wushuang. Keep yourselves safe, and report any changes immediately in turns." "Yes, ma'am." Li Xuanping, who tried to topple Li Xuanling from the leader position yesterday, seemed much calmer at this moment. He nodded in agreement with the other 3, and then turned and walked out of the hall. On the snowy night, a group from the Songyuan post began to clear the snow path along the way. 3,000 heavily armored Longyu army members majestically and swiftly advanced towards the east, toward the Wushuang realm. The cold resistance levels, following Li Xuanling's assigned tasks, went ahead to their respective positions. This war, deciding the attribution of Longyu, commenced as Long Mountain took the initiative to advance.